This conference will now be recorded.
Welcome to our budget meeting, April 12th, 2024, to talk about something. Budget retreat. Talk about the budget. Do we need to go around the room?
No treat in this.
There's no treat. Okay, can you turn over to Jason?
Okay, well, thank you for being here again this morning. We hope this is helpful to break it up in chunks. So thank you. Today's, I think, our first attempt to maybe put the pieces of the puzzle together. And we focused on capital, infrastructure, and projects and different things. And now we're going to start putting it together, including operations and personnel, and kind of see where we go from here. Let me again say thanks to Levi for his help in putting this together. I have a hard time stomaching the thought that I can't do this without him. We really appreciate Levi and all he's done for the city. So with that being said, let's get going. This is kind of our schedule. Budget retreat today, and then we scheduled a follow-up meeting on April 24th. And this is the time we talked about, but I know it may pose some conflicts for the mayor. I know she had Wasatch Integrated meeting, and I know Perry had a ramp meeting on that night, I think.
So it's second.
That's kind of the date and time we've set. We can alter that if we need to.
I actually, so I have a Lakeview board meeting, but I told them I had a budget meeting, so
Okay, so you're
they're
okay.
going to excuse me from that one.
Okay.
I don't know about you, Perry, if that works for you.
Mine did 7.
Okay.
And it's in this room.
Okay.
Okay, so we're okay.
Okay.
Almost get
All
comfortable.
right.
We would have youth court, but they're okay with us missing.
And then May 16th, adoption of the tentative budgets. And again, that's tentative. We can still continue to work on this as long as we need to. But we do have some drop dead dates with the adoption of the final budgets or the truth and taxation hearings. So that's our schedule. Today, we want to focus on these items here. The first one is thanks to Councilmember Oaks. Bluff statement, bottom line up front. And Councilmember Oaks made a great suggestion that it might be helpful if we kind of give you a high level perspective of what we're dealing with as we go into this year, and then circle back, and that'll help us put in context how we look at some of these items in the budget. Then we'll review the capital summary, information we've already looked at, so kind of a quick review. And then the operations summary, and that more addresses the level of service standard that we've set at the city. And then, of course, the personnel and the human resources. There are a couple items that we need some direction right away, particularly with the Tier 2 rate changes that were effective with the legislature. And then circle back and look at revenues and how it all fits together. So does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, you've seen this before. It's our mission statement. And then our objectives. And as we put the budget together, these are the kind of pieces we look at to put the puzzle together. We look at there's a 3-piece puzzle. We've got capital, we've got employees, we've got operations. And then there are a lot of subparts of those things, and then we bring it back together. So again, these are objectives in regards to operations, employees, and capital investment. Again, I've seen that before. Okay, so here's our bottom line up front. statement. And of course, we don't have everything here, but here are probably some of the big ticket items that we need to talk about. Obviously, we're going to have some initial budget gaps. General fund, about a $2.1 million gap. Road fund, 4.7. And most of that's related to project timing. I think last time we looked at the schedule, we were looking at 200 North project over a 3-year time span. Engineers are telling us if we compress that to a 2-year time span, we can get some cost savings and get out of the mess sooner, which would be nice. Water fund, 1.1 million. Power fund is something we talked about at our last meeting, and that's a gap. But we've also programmed a 5% rate increase, and there's still that gap. There's still that gap. Granted, there are some pretty significant capital projects in the power fund, and then the stormwater fund. So of course, there are other funds to deal with, but these are probably the biggest challenges. So how do we close the gap? We reduce expenses. We look at our level of service and say we don't want to provide those services, or we want to reduce the level of service. We can use our fund balance and our reserves, which we're fortunate that we have pretty good reserves and fund balances available. Or obviously you can increase revenues, or in respect to the general fund, taxes is probably really your source of revenue for the general fund. Wow. So we impressed you enough already?
That's a big gap.
Well, I was just wondering, had we made different decisions, not that we can go back in time, but just so that we can see moving forward, that maybe incremental increases are better, because then we avoid such a big gap. Is that a truthful statement, do you think? If we would have not just held the rates, if we would have done a little bit of an increase rather than use fund balance in previous years, would that have?
Oh, yeah,
helped
obviously,
reduce
yeah,
this
for
gap?
sure,
Okay.
for sure.
Okay,
Yeah.
just because it's hard in the moment, but then you have that big of a gap. And then,
And you remember that last year our gap was even larger to start
Yeah.
with.
right, and so hopefully we can
It
close
was
that
about $3 million,
in talking.
and you did a property tax increase, pretty significant increase, and that helped fund a lot of the gap. But we did some other things too, as we used fund balance and deferred some things, and those are obviously still options this year.
I guess the big thing to keep in mind, just these are the numbers as we go through the rest of the slides, and you look at the specific capital projects again, and then operating increases. Just keep these kind of numbers in mind, as that's what we're trying to fill. Okay.
So we're going to kind of work backwards. Capital summary, again, these are things you've looked at in the past. And we'll kind of slide through these pretty quickly. There are major asset categories: land, buildings, equipment, improvements, infrastructure, and vehicles. I think you've seen most of those, with the exception of maybe vehicles and equipment. So this is the first category of buildings. If you remember this spreadsheet off the left, it has the listing of the projects by fund. So you can see which items are part of the general fund and which items are part of other funds. So as you're looking at, how to fill a gap, it needs to pertain to the fund. And then the first column is our current budget. FY25 is what is included in this budget, and then projecting needs for 26 and 27. One thing that is not on here, and we talked about, and we wanted to include it, but we don't have a good enough number to even suggest it, is if we were to make some changes for the power building, do something there. So that's not on our list. There are some things that we've already kicked down the road. For example, the underground oil tank replacement. We were looking at that and felt like we needed to do that right away. We had someone come out and look at that, and they say, you're in better shape than you thought you might be. So we were able to push that $100,000 to a future year. So there are a lot of things that we've already gone through the process of trying to defer if we can, or offset another way. So everything you're going to see today is we think are important things to look at. Okay. Equipment, this one's a little busy, but you can kind of see the equipment that is included as part of the budget. For example, you can see the body camera system that Chief Ober brought to you several months ago, $136,500. That one's highlighted because most of that is outside funding through the beer tax revenue. So if you go down that list, there aren't huge ticket items. Most of it's just trying to keep up with just routine replacement to avoid future costs.
What's the Lucas device?
I'm sorry?
Lucas device?
That is
Isn't that the fire department?
high advanced AED, part defibrillator.
Okay.
Is it one or two of them?
It's two. There's $20,000 each, and I think the current ones they have are pretty old, so that's what Chief was saying. Maybe I'm wrong, but he was saying replace a couple.
Those are, an upgrade there. Okay. Next item, infrastructure. Again, off the left is the fund. We have road fund, water fund, stormwater fund, and ARPA. We mentioned the two major projects in the road fund would be 200 North and Mutton Hollow. And then some other projects, including repaving from Angel Street down to West Davis Corridor. Some work on Main Street as UDOT does their work this fall or this summer with repaving Main Street. It gives us an opportunity to change parking on Main Street. So those are there. Highlighted there in the stormwater fund, $2 million. That project will be done if the funding comes through. We were kind of promised that, but it's not a definite. So we're still working on that. And then under the ARPA fund, that's more of just a carryover. All the current projects are not going to be done by the end of 24, so they're moving into 25. So, and those are all reserve funds. So those are the infrastructure projects we talked about. The main focus will be 200 North, water line improvements and street improvements.
Good question. It says 200 North widen and repave. The widen aspect of that, is that just, because I've looked at 200 North closely, and there's a lot of areas where people, their driveways, the road is too low to where the driveway is, and so the driveway kind of comes over and the water goes underneath. And I've had a lot of people that I've talked to just over the last year and a half, or a handful of people that are concerned about 200 North and if it's going to be 4 lanes versus 2 lanes. And so I'm just curious, just the widen. Maybe I'm getting too nitpicky on the
I probably don't have a good answer for you. It's probably a question for Josh.
Okay.
Do you know, Jason, on that for sure?
I thought it was 2.
Because last I checked, it was just going to be as is 2 lanes.
That would be my understanding.
Put a middle
the turning.
There is already a middle lane that goes all the way down.
Okay.
But if anything, it probably needs to be
I go up and down.
more narrow and less wide.
I think when we say wide, most of it would be their curb work would take place. And then we would extend the existing asphalt to that new curb. I think that
So
would,
widen doesn't necessarily mean of the pavement.
not necessarily
It's,
lane traffic,
Yeah.
road
Okay.
work. That would be my take.
That's slightly off topic.
That would be my take on it.
Just curious.
Okay. Any questions on that?
The widen Crestwood, the money this year, a lot of that was actually widen the road, or was that the study,
That's the study, I
so,
believe.
so the 250,000,
That's where I
25,
went into the wrong.
This is just engineering.
Yeah,
that's just engineering.
that's probably, that's more of a study for that bigger project, but
That if we decide not to do, would we be able to avoid that 250?
I think the 250 was just to approach the engineers to try to design everything.
I think what we've done is we've pushed Crestwood Road down in the future.
Maybe never. But I know,
I probably can't answer that.
No, I got you.
I think what Josh wants to do is enough engineering to say what's the best solution for Crestwood Road. So that 250 is design and engineering work.
Man, you sure would have thought for 480 we would be able to.
Yeah, get some.
We're in the wrong business, guys.
Yeah.
I agree, though. I think that's probably not as high a priority as.
I'm just trying to, I'm looking at gaps, you
Sure,
know,
absolutely. That's what we want you to do.
so.
But regardless, the water line has to be replaced there, right? Did
Crestwood?
Josh say it was pretty bad?
That was the main concern.
Yeah, and I'm not exactly sure what section that is. It's 100,000. Do you recall, Levi, on Crestwood water line?
It's in,
I didn't see water line on Chris.
Down
There in the water fund?
Water fund.
So that says
Waterline.
200, oh, never mind,
Underwater.
I agree, the next one down, sorry.
on the water fund, that 100,000.
So
That's probably a study too.
since we ended up having to spend $1.4 million on a water line be from Main Street to 400 West that we were not expecting because we didn't know UDOT was going to redo that road, does that push the east part of 200 North back a little ways because we ended up having to spend money that we weren't anticipating?
No, because the project that we're doing from Maine to Florida West, we determined to use ARPA funds for that project.
Okay, I didn't know they were available, that was available for
And in fact, you can see right here, the 200 North water line, 400 West of Maine. That's a project you already
For the
approved.
bottom.
That's what I meant, and it wasn't one that we had on our ticket last year.
Right, so we were able to
So
push
we
that from
had
water to current year and use ARPA
And
funds.
that's why I didn't know if that would push our Crestwood stuff a year further behind because we were doing a lot more work on Crestwood than we anticipated. I mean, on 200
I
North
think
than we
initially we would think
anticipated.
that, but since we were able to use ARPA fund.
Well, and I also want to know, do you want to be tearing that much road up in one city at one time? That doesn't make a lot of sense to me either.
Yeah, they're going to start on that project, I think, fairly soon.
Yeah, we've committed to that one.
Yeah.
And I would have,
And,
you know, and it's gonna divert a lot of traffic onto other roads. People now can go up to 89.
Yeah.
And so,
Yeah,
tear
that's
both
probably,
roads up before that's done makes absolutely sense.
yeah, timing's probably a better question for Josh on that.
Okay.
Yeah, the 200 North Waterline, 400 West of Maine is, we have piggybacked onto the UDOT project. So the UDOT is going to actually bid that and manage that project and do the project, and we've paid for it.
It's one we did not have on our radar last year. Came up. We have to do it again, but I would have thought it would have pushed back.
I think last is vehicles probably. Oh, I'm sorry, power infrastructure. So as I mentioned, there are some pretty significant projects we're doing this year. Those highlighted in blue are projects that are funded through the collection of impact fees. So it doesn't help a lot in
it doesn't
creating the
indicate,
gap
yeah.
because they can only be spent in that manner
But there's
at those projects. The new line construction, the 500,000 is essentially funded because we collect money from developers to make those new line constructions. So it's really not really our cost. If that makes sense.
Yeah,
And so the blue ones are completely funded by that.
Yeah.
Okay, I always am confused. They're like, sometimes we say eligible for funding and I'm never sure. I'm like, does that mean it's completely funded or?
Funded by.
The new line construction is,
funded by development.
Our current
so
impact fee
if
balance
a new
will not pay
development
for
comes
all
in,
of
a
that.
new subdivision, development will pay the city money for extending
But
those
it's just
facilities.
eligible.
And so that's where that
We don't.
expense is.
And so the 500K you have, those are just wrong based upon history more than anything. Because you got it for 4 years in a row.
I'm sorry.
At the very top line, new line construction, at 500,000 is pretty much just like a rough order of magnitude because
Yeah,
of history. Okay,
yeah.
okay. All right.
And then maybe keep in mind too, we have another $500,000 for just maintenance of power infrastructure that's not considered a capital asset. And when we get into the operations, we can look at that. But we're trying to identify just those things that are classified as capital.
Right.
That key clarity is quite important, I think, as well. They've had problems over there for quite some time, and they need to get just that fixed.
It's true.
Okay. Oh, I'm sorry.
Oh, wait, can I ask just one quick question?
Sure.
So why would there be such a discrepancy in a long-range study for other streets like Burton Lane, Country Mill, all that? And yet the study for Crestwood is 480,000, these ones are 60,000.
One's for power, one's for the road.
Yeah. Well, this right here is all to do a study of Crestwood, the 400.
Right, yeah.
Well, you look at the next page and all these studies are.
No, those numbers are not numbers to do a study. There was a study done and that was the cost to upsize the wire that the study said it would cost.
Yeah,
Does that make sense?
that's a little confusing. We had a long-range plan study done several years ago, and they recommended these projects. So we probably need to change it. It's not the study, it's actually doing the projects.
Yeah,
Oh, that's the actual
in
project.
this case, it's to pay engineers to do a study.
Yeah.
And in this case, there was a study done and it recommended to do these projects and it's gonna cost $60,000 to
Sorry
replace
about
the
that.
wire.
That's a little confusing. Yeah. And a lot of those things, if you remember last time, as Brian was talking, some of those long-range plan study projects were sooner rather than later. And Brian took a good look at that and said, well, we've changed how we're delivering our systems, so we can push some of those projects down the road. So we'll change that. That's a little confusing.
I have a question just before we move on, and this is kind of more of a broad question. But as we go through these and the various projects and whether it's the road or power, would there be a way to do a map, or maybe several maps, and highlight the parts of the road and the parts that need power? I think if we get down the line to where we do need to go do a truth in taxation, it may be helpful as we talk about it in our city council meetings to show maps, to show the public. It's one thing to have a list of all the projects, but to actually show it and highlight it how much is needed in various parts of the city. And I think that helps us to
Good idea.
not only visualize it and what, Mike, what you brought up, the different road projects and how close they are to each other and when they're all supposed to start. So it's kind of hard for me to kind of keep track in my mind
That's great.
where the
idea.
roads are, but I just think there's so much here. I would love to see that visually if that's not too much work. And
We
Actually,
got Jordan, and Jordan can do
yeah,
anything.
Jordan's actually working on something like that already. Mayor had a great suggestion a while back, and they're gonna do some kind of interactive map on the website that people can just pull up and see all the, it'll have public projects as well as, private,
oh, that would be great.
just, so
And then
great
if-
educational.
And then if we, when we talk about this in city council, if there's a way to put some of that information on maps that we can just pull up, just to visually,
Yeah,
just let the public know, like, this is what we're dealing with as a city, the challenges. Because a map kind of really says it all pretty quickly.
Yeah, That's a great idea.
back to your question, A2, on the widening of 200 North. So the reason why we're not adding additional lanes on the east side is the traffic study came back saying that because of the sheer number of residential driveways, all the curb cuts, they did not recommend an additional lane. So,
Oh, that's good to know.
Yeah.
And I don't think it needs one. If anything, the road probably doesn't need to be as wide. The curbs can come out.
wherever we're putting in curbs on 200 North, we're considering that as widening, even though it's, there's a little more shoulder, but it won't be additional lanes.
Okay. So here are the items that maybe, I don't know how to say this, that probably have a little more flexibility than the items we looked at previously. So we looked at fiscal year 25. These are the projects that we've talked about. We talked about the cremation garden, part of the cemetery. And I think Cole expressed the need there, or what we're trying to accomplish there. Look at the Angel Street soccer complex playgrounds. That's a routine playground replacement. That's $300,000. Rail trail resurface, $75,000. Resurface the pickleball tennis courts, $60,000. Some gate replacements of the police station, 18. Wilderness Park trail improvements, 15. We think that is eligible for impact fees. Finished the City Hall landscaping at $50,000. West Davis Corridor trail enhancements, $630,000. That is funded from an outside source. Pioneer Park is an obligation that we have. With $208,000, we pay for that through impact fees, and that is our final payment on that. The revenue bond. Cemetery perpetual care, $750,000. That money would come from the perpetual care fund, so it would not affect the general fund. And then we go down to the ramp fund, the rail trail, restroom and parking. I think you met earlier this week. Is that right, Perry?
Yeah.
And I think those were two projects that were presented, 350 and the digital sign at Barnes Park. Again, that funding is restricted to ramp projects.
Yeah.
So,
And I could see the rail trailhead restroom one being maybe broken into two.
spread it out.
Spread it out over a couple of years.
The Wilderness Park, the funding this year, that's just for what is taking place already, right?
The 45.
Or no, the 340,000.
Yeah.
Under the ramp fund.
That's the rail trail, not the wilderness park, right?
Right, you're right.
No, the 340, that's
No, Yeah, that's what.
Sorry, I looked at the wrong line.
So, so, I mean, one of the things that I'm looking at, if you look at the following year, the total amount jumps to almost 5 million, but the largest chunk of that is the Trappers Field design and development, which I think we kind of agreed in the meeting, as much as it would be great to get that park in and everything, you know, that's sort of a want, not a need right now, right? And so if hypothetically you took that out, then all of a sudden the total for FY 2026 becomes, yeah, like 1.1, right? And that, I guess, that just makes me wonder, looking forward, is there anything in FY 25 then that could be pushed to FY 26 to make those 2 years line up a little bit better so that they're both 2 million? The only thing I can see right now is maybe the Angel Street soccer complex playground. You know, the other thing that I don't know, I'm assuming we can't divide the old sections of the irrigation system. That probably can't be divided. I don't know, I guess I'm thinking out loud, trying to figure out if there is anything that could.
What else do we want to do with the landscaping?
That's my question too.
Sensory.
Here.
Here, the 50,000.
It's probably just over here.
It's here, and I think there's some trees and things on this side.
Are you having Jim Puffer do it?
Yeah. Of course.
Right.
The rail trail resurfacing, is there sections of the trail that are really bad? I know there's some cracks that probably fill in. I walk over there from time to time, but it's mostly near Smith's. Is that something that's can be put off another year?
I think those are the questions we want to address, keeping in mind that as we have our budget objectives, one of our objectives is to not defer maintenance too far down the road, because it ends up costing us more in the long run. So I think that's kind of the decision we have to evaluate. You know, if you look at the playgrounds, I mean, that's a lot of money, but is it one of those things, by deferring it, do we cause greater problems? Or do we say, well, that's maybe something, since it's a one-time expense, that we use fund balance to meet that? I think a lot of these questions, as we start looking through this list, is these one-time items may be very appropriate to use fund balance. We're in a fortunate position to have good reserves and do it here rather than using fund balance for any ongoing operational expenses.
No, I really like that. I mean, even things like the cremation, or, I mean, you obviously don't want to go hog wild on it, but I like where your head's at, Dean, on doing one-time expenses to make up for, so that we're actually looking at. I like that a lot.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And I think that really becomes evident in our next slide, when we talk about vehicles, because that's how we've approached the vehicles. We've been fortunate that our budgets have come in finish the year strong. And so, I mean, there are two ways to get fund balance: either revenues are up or expenditures are down. And we're fortunate that expenditures have been contained, I think, really well by departments. So it's allowed us to have fund balance to use it for one-time expenditures. So as we look at the next slide under vehicles, you can see that. With the exception of the police vehicles and the enterprise fund vehicles, we have funded most of our vehicle purchases through the use of fund balance, because we think that's something that if you were in a pinch, you could say, well, we don't need to make that expense. And that might be another way to approach FY25. You can see the listing here, Parks and Recreation, that's replacement of 2 vehicles. You can see the cost increase that we're dealing with, from 60 to 84. I mean, that's what we're seeing with vehicles. So Public Works, we took, originally we were going to buy some larger vehicles in '24. We could see some savings by purchasing passenger vehicles. So we front-loaded some more passenger vehicles in our current year and pushed to that 358 is essentially 2 dump trucks. So that's kind of what we've programmed for Public Works. Community Development is a vehicle for one of our inspectors. Police vehicle, we try to keep on a fairly constant rotation schedule there. Power fund, a couple crew trucks, ambulance. That is something that we would recommend that we do through a lease purchase to kind of spread those costs out. Fire truck rescue, current year we paid about 153 on that lease payment. Fiscal year 25, we only have half a year left, and then that payment drops off. But of course, we suggest you fill it with the purchase of another fire-related vehicle.
Of course.
Yeah, and then water fund and stormwater fund.
So why do you, just a question is, why do you think that vehicles, since they're such an important part of our operation, and having good running vehicles is very, very important. So why do you think that should just be a one-time purchase and not a line item?
I don't. I would love to see it included as part of your ongoing revenues. But I think when we're trying to fill the gap, this is one way to fill
Because
that.
I'm thinking, that would, then it would always be there, and then it would, and when you don't, doesn't mean you buy a vehicle every year. You just take the average of 5 years and you carry over each year into a
These
future
are
account.
actual vehicle.
Yeah. And the only reason I'm saying that is, I get the luxury, I guess, of being with mosquito abatement, so I get to watch a lot of vehicle purchases.
Yeah.
And, we had a discussion about it last night, because when I first got on there, I said to Gary, why are you buying these crappy vehicles? Because there's no resale value to them, because you can only keep them for 5 years, because you don't have full, you need to get new vehicles to turn them over. And so he started buying Ford F-150s, and at that time they were $25,000. And the resale on them was incredible. And they were actually doing really well. Well, then they started buying the smaller trucks, because he said, oh, the kids, But last night he goes, we're done. We're done buying these smaller ones, and we're done buying these odd vehicles. He says, we can get Ford F-150s. The resale value on them is better than anything we've ever had.
Yeah.
And so, and that's what I was trying to push when we did this fleet thing, when I started 6 or 8 years ago, pushing the fleet thing, say, why are we not just buying like F-150s that we can use? Maybe they're not the best thing for what we have, but they're the one that they're still available. You can get them, and the resale on them is really good. Well, then we started buying all these vans, electric vehicles, things that have a horrible resale value to them. And all we're doing now is just losing our money on our vehicles. Yes, a $23,000 F-150 is now 50,000 or 50.
44.
Hey, a Colorado, we bought one on state contract. A Chevy Colorado, paid for it yesterday, was $40,000. Unbelievable.
Have we purchased any electric vehicles this year, as far as we know, the city or last year?
I don't think we're getting.
We talked
Because I don't
about that
think
and
we- yeah.
stopped
I think
talking.
that's
Is that- yeah,
been
that's what I
removed
thought.
from
I
the
think
table.
we
Yeah.
I think a few years ago,
We tried it.
there was a council that
Mhm.
felt strongly about electric vehicles and directed the police department to do that. And
That's
they,
not what I
you
thought.
know, like,
It was a city manager that wanted to buy electric vehicles. The council was highly against it because they wanted good rotating.
anyway, they were directed to do
Agreed.
that. So,
But
And
that
a
wasn't your
side
guys'
note,
fault, that was them.
did we ever look over the maintenance costs we've had to see if they've correlationally gone down with the newer vehicles?
We talked with Josh about that, and we don't have a lot of hard data yet, because I think we're still moving that direction, but I think if you were to ask our mechanics, they'd say for sure,
Okay.
for sure.
That helps a lot.
As far as a quantitative number, I'd probably,
The only reason I've even taken any extra time on vehicles is because they're such an important part of our operation every day.
Yeah.
And I know having a vehicle down is miserable.
Yeah.
Mechanics don't have time to fix vehicles, so they end up having to run them back and forth to the dealerships, get them fixed. They're just not even worth
An
calling.
interesting side comment, at the conference I was just at, there was a city, they were a larger city, but they mentioned that they took the approach of only buying one specific vehicle, like F-150s. And then that cut down their costs, because then all the repairs were on the same kind of vehicle, the parts were the same, the places you took them took them to one shop that did F-150s really well. Like,
That's why Southwest does 737s.
it really just consolidated so that mechanics aren't trying to find different parts and order things. I thought that was interesting.
and I think if you look at current year, what Josh bought, there are three F-150s. One F-250, and Power is F-150s as well. So I think we're
Going down that.
That's where I hope we're going.
That's
What about like sedan type vehicles?
passenger type vehicles.
Yeah, passenger.
We really don't buy any of those. I mean, police department may be the exception, but other than that,
Community development.
Yeah,
I thought
community development.
community development would probably be kind of an SUV type.
Oh, really? Okay.
They put their signs in it and keep their signs and stuff.
Or like Land Rover.
Okay, I think that
Scary.
is wraps up capital. Now, we're gonna jump into operations, and this is our attempt to take probably 50 pages of information
Try that.
and put it on one page.
Okay.
So again, this does not include personnel, does not include capital, it just includes operating. And this is just general fund. So if you look at the operating expenditures by category, and you look at fiscal year 23, we spent about $4.7 million. Those are actual numbers. Fiscal year 24, our budget is 4.8. So not a huge increase from year over year, especially with what we're facing with inflation and other things. And I think that's where the departments have done a good job with the direction. Keep operating expenditures, as flat as we possibly can. And then we jump to fiscal year 25, the budget. You can go down and there are some changes. If you look at, for example, information systems, there's a pretty sizable increase, but what's driving that one is, I think we talked about this earlier, we use Microsoft products,
No software subscriptions.
and our
Licenses.
current
They're changing the way to get money. with subscription.
annual fee or membership, whatever.
Subscription.
Yeah.
Subscription, that's what I was looking for. There's about 30,000. This year it's gone up to 65,000.
I think they're trying to force people to get the Office 365.
Yes, 100%.
They're basically raising the prices so that it's pretty much the same. So you might as well get the Office 365 that comes with other.
How would it be to have that
So
control?
it's-
Because you have to
They
do
got you.
They got you, man. You're so
And then you
toast.
can't stop.
Like
That's
these
all your stuff.
stupid
I like
iPhones.
your.
I mean, Ryan looked at
Drug
maybe
dealer.
doing something other than Microsoft, and I said, we don't want to go down that road right now.
I've known a couple cities that tried just going like Google, and it's just,
We don't
if
want
you
to.
use anything beyond just the high level, it's,
You can't open attachments, you can't.
I still got, you still got.
Probably.
Another big ticket, well, for example, elections, we won't have fiscal year 25, planning and zoning, that 200,000. That is, I think we've had discussions on revising our land use code completely.
So that's what's in the budget.
That's all one item, $200,000 to
Now,
do
I
that.
have a question for that. In the conversations hiring a professional planner, maybe, right? Does that take into account that the planner could probably do that or work on that, or is that in
That
addition?
probably does not take
Well,
that into
Okay,
account.
okay, just
Right.
wondering.
If we hired an additional FTE as a planner, I think so, but
Okay, but we don't-
yeah, that's such a huge project.
Okay.
We need to get some consulting.
Okay.
And the rest of those items are of just increased costs we're seeing with, for example, parks. Most of that's just turf maintenance, just the cost to maintain what we have. Recreation expenses up, but also there's a matching revenue coming in to cover that. Anything else we need to add there?
So I just go to
So
the
Dean, just on the information systems, it's not just gone up 60,000. I mean, it went from, information systems went up about like 60,000 from 23 to 24, and then you're saying it's gonna go up an additional 60, 80,000, so it's gone up 120,000 in 2 years?
Well, maybe if we jump to the next slide, that'll show a little more detail on that.
Yeah, that's what we're dealing with software.
I'm just trying to figure, we were talking 200,000.
I think the last couple of years, just the subscription costs just continue to go up.
Are we paying on subscriptions we don't need?
We had Ryan look at that. We went through the whole list, and there is one that we're going to look at reducing. I can't remember which one that is.
Probably the article.
I think My Meter is what we're
My Meter.
talking about, getting rid of. That's one where people can go online and see their usage.
I don't know that anybody uses that.
So, I mean,
Yeah, we've had a meeting twice.
Is that something, I mean, because there's so much, is that something maybe we need to have an audit done of? Our whole thing?
Well, we could, but I think Ryan and Jake have a pretty good feel for, I mean, we can go through that list.
Kind of like that new app where there's no people that check and see if you have 2 Netflix subscriptions that you're paying for. But I mean, I imagine that we would know that.
I don't think there's anything that we're inadvertently paying for.
Got it.
It's just.
We were required as part of a new accounting standard to go through all subscription-based software. We identified 30 or 35 on the list in order to see what met the accounting standard or not. And at that time, we did a pretty thorough review of what we had.
But to Mike's credit, I think just in today's world, it's so easy for one department to add software, another department
It
to
is.
say, I want this software.
Mhm.
And then you get in a
It
situation
becomes
where
a point where you end up with, say, you get a new one and 20 people go into the new one and one person stays on the old one. And you pay for that
maybe both
subscription.
softwares can do the same thing, but you have one
It's
here and
like
one
this new
here.
meter thing, we just paid for all this and had all this work done, and now it sounds like we have an old system we're paying for. It's
So,
completely obsolete.
I think that's something we need to continually look at and say, does it make sense to have these, this software over here and this one?
It's worth an audit.
But the reason for these cost increases, it's just.
But you look at these
every year
items,
They just,
and the ones that, all of them, you take a 2-year and you look at all of them, they're fairly close, except that one.
Yeah, he said that at the beginning.
And I think that's Ryan's concern about that fragmentation, that the farms kind of do their own thing. And he's worked really hard to bring that under
Rein it in.
his.
he's very, yeah, he's
Review.
really careful to watch it, and he does a great job of that.
And we've asked departments that as they look at software, that they run it through IT, obviously, to. So, but here are some significant changes, not that we've listed everything here. We say, well, is there anything you really stand out? There are a couple items that we talked about last year, that security information, the event management system, that Arctic Wolf, which helps identify if there are any intruders on your system. We didn't do it last year. This is one that is in the budget, but one that you could kick down the road again. File storage management's probably one that you could delay. Microsoft Office 365, we don't think we can do anything with. The land use code, we can review how we want to approach that. There are a few operating expenses that have gone up in fire and public works. Yeah, not huge numbers, but yeah, everything adds up, right? A little bit in police, dispatch has gone up, but I mean, that's a fixed cost. We can't do anything about that. And then some increase just in maintenance costs in the parks department. There is one level of service change on this list, and that is the bottom number, that 22,000. Cole is suggesting that there might be a better approach to restroom cleaning rather than taking his crews away from maintaining the park, is to hire someone to come in at the beginning of each day, clean all the park restrooms, and then roll out. I think that makes a lot of sense, but
we're already running a crew there. I mean, how difficult is it? I mean, I hate to clean the bathrooms. I'm sorry, I get it, but I also, there was a lot of things I had to do when I worked in construction that I didn't like doing.
I guess to that point though, the crew spends, a couple hours at one location or.
They do.
And then, so by the time you get to the last, the restrooms have been like dirty. I don't know. I wonder if that would factor in as well versus.
Just wondering, it seems like they're already there. I mean, they pull a truck and trailer and equipment's in the truck and it's just a job. One of the duties assigned.
They just take a big hose and just open the door and.
the fire department started doing it.
Don't say that. It's not like that. Be crucified.
So anyway, that's probably the level of service change question.
That land use code is a big number, 200,000. But it's one of those things where, yeah, we've gone without a major land use code update for so many years, and we could kick it down another year or two. The other side of that is, you know what, whether we pay for it this year or wait a year or two, we'll probably pay for it out of reserves either way, right? And it's one of those things where, is it worth it just to do it now, get the benefit now? Because undoubtedly we'll continue to have these projects come through. And if our codes aren't, really up to snuff, you tend to run into little issues here and there. We've seen a couple here and there where our codes haven't been quite maybe where we would have liked. I mean, I think of like Mr. Car Wash as one example where maybe we would have had a little better product had our standards been a little bit higher.
Well, part of that too that I was wondering is what kind of involvement will the council have in that type of a thing? Because if that means setting things up to where we don't run into the situation that we've been into on 200 North, where it's just a hodgepodge of, I mean, especially with Main Street revitalization, everything like that's isn't that kind of an opportunity where we can put in language that requires like, similar to like what Park City has where it has to look like a certain so that we get that consistency.
See, I think what you got is very valid, but an ordinance in a city, in a growing city, is a living ordinance. It's moving. I don't care where you start from. You're going to have issues. You're always going to have things come up. There's no such thing as the perfect code. I don't know why you would want to spend $200,000.
Because you're being instead of being reactive, you're proactive. Because the reactive side of it is Mr. Car Wash comes in.
Well, we don't know. I mean, I can tell you the reactive part of it now is way different than what it would have been 20 years ago, right?
Yeah.
And so you're reacting on growth, you're reacting on new thoughts, new things. And it's just one of those things where I'm like, you have a code in place, it's pretty standard. You're talking about, and what would it do? I mean, V is B. Okay, this is a general commercial area. You're just allowed, this is your permitted uses, this is your conditional uses. You're gonna get an O that says, this is general commercial area, these are your permitted uses. Maybe they'll be more restrictive, less restrictive.
More restrictive. Yeah, and I think that's where then you could be reactive to like, if it's more restrictive, which ours is not, then when someone comes in and says, yeah, but we'd really like to do this, then you can look at it and change the living document because you see a benefit. But if you're super loose,
We're not super.
aren't we?
Well, I do think we have some codes that are circular, you know, they'll reference another code, like, for example, the accessory dwelling garage type thing, not a dwelling, the accessory building. One part of the code said it needed to be this high, and then another part in the code referenced another code that was confusing. So, I mean, we do have some confusion. That happens occasionally, not all the time, but occasionally. And it makes a huge difference to those people who are affected by it. It's in my neighborhood. It's been a huge source of contention.
Yeah.
I think our codes are not awful, but they're compared to a lot of cities that I've seen at least, and Melinda and I've talked a lot about this. They're pretty basic a lot of parts. I mean, you'll compare our sign code to a lot of other sign codes around, the Wasatch Front, and ours is this long and theirs are this long, and so it's just one of those things where, I think we could get in front of some of these things. Again, I think you could always say we lived with this code for many decades and could still kick it down the road another couple of years. But I feel like we're at the point where it's been so long since we've done a major overhaul that it's something that would take so long to just piecemeal bit by bit. And if we just did a significant update to at least get us up to maybe catch us up a little bit more.
And
Help.
to your point too, I mean, we were this close to having a quick whack going in addition to these other two. And that would have been just so bad for the city and people would have been incredibly upset. And if we didn't catch that, I think that would have been really bad. And I think there's probably other areas too. And so I'm kind of inclined to lean on you, Jason, to think if that's something that is needed, and what John said, to have it more restrictive, but then allow us to lessen that on a case by case. I like that.
Or that's a one-time
Yeah, I mean,
deal. Is that something that can be used, like you mentioned, one time be used in the?
20 years ago, quick quacks wouldn't even have been an issue because car
Exactly.
washes were not moneymakers, and
Right.
so it didn't. So we ended up with a deal where we had an ordinance and we saw we had an issue. It's a living ordinance. We changed it. I mean, so it's like, now if we have a horrible part of the sign ordinance, then let's fix the sign portion of it. I don't see revamping the entire thing at a huge cost because it's just adding a whole new. Nobody actually really knows how to interpret until you have an issue that goes with it.
I see that point.
I'll just say I have been working with Melinda on this, like, I chatted with her and maybe she was already going to do it, but I kind of said, please ask for money to update the code, because that's been, ever since I was on planning commission, I mean, the code has been a huge pain in my neck, and everyone's neck, it's always, oh, we want to do this, oh, we can't do this, we want to, or whatever, and it's not just wants or whatever, it's like John was saying, we've got kind of a hodgepodge in certain areas because our code doesn't have any sort of a visual guideline. And it isn't necessarily that it's bad. It's just it's not where I think codes should be at this point in time, kind of like Jason was saying, it hasn't been done in decades and needs rewording. And there are a lot of things in there that I think honestly could get us in trouble federally with some of the wording that we have. Like, I've read things and been like, probably if like a federal regulator read that, the city could be liable for some housing discrimination type stuff. And so I think it would be a huge benefit to have it looked at and updated.
It's one of those things where I think I 100% agree with everything you just said. It's also a huge number, and recognizing nothing's easy to cut when we're looking at trying to fill this gap. And it is one of those things where, we could probably cut that in. It did come out of the blue. I mean, this is the first time we think we put it out there. So if all we do this year is say it's on the radar and maybe we, consider it again next year, that's.
Or how much, I mean, I guess, are we talking like 200 grand? Does that mean you basically hire somebody for a year and a half to only work on just you? Because that seems like a lot, like.
It's such a huge project, yeah.
That's a lot of money. So it
Can we
would
space it out
go
over a
longer.
couple
than-
years?
It would take
Yeah, we could-
a number of, yeah.
Probably a consultant.
I'm just saying, from even a consult, like if I were a
It's
consultant,
gonna
I'd
go
think,
into
oh,
a
but you just
group
paid my salary.
It's gonna
for-
go into an AI and get it done.
And I can
You know what?
guarantee you, it's gonna
Honest-
be plagiarized from the one they just
Well-
wrote from the last city.
Yeah.
I mean, isn't that the way general plans work too, though, is that you get a consultant and yes, they're gonna take so much of what they've done for the last other 10 clients, but it also involves meeting with the city and doing a lot of workshops and figuring out what is it that you need to make it work for your city. So it is a pretty involved process.
Yeah.
But again, I don't wanna push this at all, like, this is an absolute need because it's really like everything's worthy of consideration, but I know that we've got a big gap to fill too.
And it could be one of those things we'll wait and see
Mhm.
as we look at the community development department and potentially some restructuring there and some different things. That
Right, 'cause that would help.
Yeah.
Maybe that'd be the
absolutely.
time to review it after
Yeah.
that takes place.
It's a good idea.
Oh, one more thing on that though, if we end up, or whatever, later now, if we end up moving forward on that, can we please use a different consultant than whoever did the general plan?
Yeah, for sure. I think it would be a completely different skill. set.
Okay, because.
Yeah.
It's not
I know.
Who did that?
Agree.
I don't know who did it.
Agree.
I don't either. I
that.
don't remember.
I'm sure it's printed on there
I
somewhere,
bet the
but
information is- yeah.
It's my
Okay.
sister.
nice.
It was John. It
I
was
want to go
John's
back a
consulting.
slide. So I want to go back to this one. So, operating expenditures, we haven't seen huge peaks here, but it's a significant part of our budget. So just kind of understand where this is one piece of the puzzle.
I mean, I look at this and for the last 2 years and you go back, I mean, that's, hats off to the staff. Keeping,
Routine.
containing it is with inflation that has been running rampant
Mhm.
for the last 3 years.
Yeah, we could look at
That's a good
22
point,
and
Barry.
21 too, but
And then it'd be depressing. It'd be really
I
depressing.
mean, we've really tried
And
to
because of how
keep
Yeah.
operating pretty flat. And I think departments have done a great job with that.
No, I agree completely.
Okay, so that's piece number 2. Now we're going to go to
good stuff.
personnel. We have given you the staffing chart by department, so you should have that. And this is something that,
Okay.
this is something that's included as part of the budget every year. So you're approving position staffing by department. You do that each year. So you're approving these positions in each department. So in administration, you see positions that you approve, and you do the same thing for each department. And,
Just separate.
no, sorry,
There
Mike,
you go.
sorry. And then we've asked each department to kind of say, looking down the road, what are your needs? And if you remember in FY '24, we had a similar chart and we did not fund any positions at all. FY '25, we're suggesting that we do the same thing, that we don't fund any new positions. So none of these numbers that you see are included as part of that gap, unfortunately. For example, you can see, I think we need additional help of finance and accounting. I really feel that way now. But
Yeah.
And these numbers that includes pay and benefits,
It's a
so
loaded
don't
rate.
think it's gonna pay someone $91,000, that's
for example, I'm sorry,
that's good.
Assistant City Attorney, I think there's probably a need there. Nick is suggesting an alternative way to fill that need by using third-year law students,
That's a good idea.
which is a which is a great suggestion.
Mhm.
And so the budget includes money to do that. So, that one can be offset. Anyway, we don't want to spend a lot of time on this, but can understand. Departments feel there are needs, yet we have not included any of those in the budget.
Thank you.
Okay. So overall, 136 full-time positions that will approve. Yes, unless the council decides to reduce the level of service and modify any of those positions. Okay, next slide. Okay, we shared this. It's getting uglier rather than better, sorry. We shared this information at our first budget meeting about health insurance costs. And we didn't have the numbers. We've had these numbers probably, I don't know, Jason, 3 or 4 weeks since we met with GBS. And they provide us every 6 months a utilization ratio of how our group is doing. And our group hasn't done so well the last 2 cycles. We've had some pretty significant health issues as part of our group. I think, as I recall, it was about 180% of premium.
Yeah.
Which
Wait, what does that mean?
we paid the premium, say we had $100 in premium, they paid out $180 in claims.
Mhm.
A lot of sick people.
Okay.
Or just a few very sick people. Yeah.
We had some pretty significant shock claims, they call them. So it's over $25,000, it's a shock claim. Thank goodness our employees have health insurance. I mean,
Yeah, exactly.
that's why it's there, but it doesn't come without a cost.
Yeah.
They indicated before we had the renewal number that with that kind of history, it'd be pretty difficult to put it out to bid and get any kind of positive effect.
So even though historically, I mean, you go back all the, to 2018, I guess was a bad year as well. But you go back the last 5 years and
They don't care.
That's remarkable, really. I mean, over 5 years.
Yeah.
Because trend's been 12 to 15%.
Right.
Probably why you were able to negotiate
you've had such great rates.
to keep them down or even lower.
Okay, so what you're saying is the party's over.
Yeah.
But what I'm saying is that right there is about a $240,000 cost.
To the city.
So then let me, how much of a cost does it cost to the city and how much does it cost to the employees?
The cost share allocation is, the city pays
Oh,
85%
15.
of the premium, and that's $240,000. And then the employee pays 15% of the premium, and I don't know what that number would be. Well,
I mean,
That's almost
a
as good as
family
federal
plan is like,
or military.
I think it's $132 a pay period for the family,
132 per paper.
So
That's a lot.
10% increase there.
So currently, high deductible health insurance plan, the family plan costs $136 per pay period or $3,500 per year. 25 rates would push that to $150 per pay period or $3,900 per year. So it'd push about $400 a year for family coverage.
And they're looking 50%, which is a great deal.
Yeah, since I have a sister-in-law who pays close to $1,000 a month just for herself.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, that's family. Our family premium right now is about $1,900. It's moving up to $2,100
a year.
a month.
A month.
Wow. John, it's your industry, buddy.
Oh, no, it is not. We're the, yeah,
No, you're the reason why though.
yeah, no,
One of them.
no, I'll go talk to Intermountain. Oh, they're the ones. See all the buildings that keep going up?
Okay, this is where we're going to need some direction. Retirement. Our employees participate, they're required to participate in the Utah retirement system. And traditionally, it was a defined benefit system. So your benefit is based on the number of years you have in the system and your final average salary. A few years ago, they implemented a tier 2 system for all new employees after a certain date. And they kept the defined benefit plan system, but they also allowed employees that did not want to be part of a defined benefit plan to be part of a defined contribution plan. So currently, there are several classifications of employees. There are public employees, and this is the required contribution for URS. So 17.97% of salary is paid into the URS system. For police, it's a little more, and for fire, it's 3.6, but there was an employee pickup, and that's been in place probably 15 years, 20 years. So you can see the total employer cost, what we pay. In tier 2, what they were attempting to do is to control the retirement costs. I'm not sure they accomplished
It
that.
didn't work.
Didn't work. So that's the unfortunate part, though, is that's what we pay for public employees.
Yeah.
But part of that is what they call an amortization.
Yeah,
That just goes into the pot to help these employees. So these employees, it says 16, but they're really only getting
10.
10.
The 6.19 is really fees for URS and
And there was-
amortization for tier 1.
The idea was that at some point, tier 1 employees are going to drop off. We can get rid of this amortization and we can contain your costs. This is not for the city, this is for state employees, everybody. We can contain your costs. But you're right, Barry, it's not working as soon as they thought it might. Yeah.
But
Okay.
they probably paid $1 million for that consulting fee to come up here.
So why is police so much higher than fire?
The benefits so much better.
Better union.
They're,
Through the state retirement. That's not through.
so instead of 2%, they get 2.5% per year.
Right.
So when we went with tier 2, they started with this, and then a few years later, they said, public safety folks, this is not just city, but statewide, their benefit isn't turning out as well as we had hoped. I don't know how to say that.
Well, in that left column, the URS required, included in that, like we said, is a benefit that the employee gets. So for public, it's 10% of that, 16. For police and fire, it's 12%. And then, like Dean mentioned, when you're tier 2, you can pick to either do the pension route or the 401k route. And if so, the cost of the pension fluctuates every year. The URS will put out new rates. And so if the cost of the pension goes above that benefit, above the 12%, then that's where the employee has to start chipping in to pay for that pension. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And so police and fire crossed that threshold, I don't know how many years ago, 4 or 5 years ago.
5 years ago.
And at the time, the way the code was written, employers did not even have the option to pay that on behalf of the employee. And so, but then they changed the code, a new bill was passed. And so for police and fire 4 or 5 years ago, employers had to make a decision. Do we want to pay that 2.59% for our employees? or are we gonna make them pay it? And most employers in large, I think, opted to pay it. And so I think it's pretty standard for police and fire to pay that 2.59. But that's kind of helps you distinguish what the URS requires versus what the employer has opted to pay on behalf of their employees. And then that third column is really just a Kaysville specific thing
Yeah.
where maybe Dean can talk
The
more about that.
5.41.
A few years ago, there was concern about some of your public safety folks were getting this percentage, others were getting less than that. So the city elected to do an additional 401k contribution for public safety to try to equalize that. It was made available for not only police, but for fire as well. So that is an additional thing that the city has done.
Those first two are really required by the URS. And that third one is Kaysville City on its own opting to pay.
So what does that cost us per year?
When you talk about tier 1 and tier 2, is it just the people that have come in that hired after a certain date, right? So people can't sign up for tier 1, not enough.
Today, tier 2,
It was 2010.
10, 11,
If you started after that date, you're in tier 2.
so it's been in place for 15 years or so.
Okay.
So this is current. We're gonna have a similar decision right now with what the legislature has done. So that's our next slide.
So these are the updated rates.
So we're seeing some reductions. We're saying that public employees are gonna go down, and you can see the savings over here. There's some savings. But they've also said that, there's another pickup available. The city has to decide on, are we willing to pick this up, or are we going to ask our employees to pay that? Someone has to pay it. It's required.
The 0.7 and the 2.14.
Yeah.
The 2.14, the city has the option to pick that up.
Right.
The 0.7.
Oh, okay, this is a new, okay.
So this is the first
I
year.
saw the 2 and then with the 2.5 was from the previous slide.
So this is the
That's
current
a new
pickup.
column.
This is a new pickup.
It's gonna be in addition to that.
We have the option to pick that up. City has to decide to pick that up or make the employee pay for it. But we don't have the option for non-public safety. The employees are required to pay that.
The employees are required.
I mentioned there was a bill, when the police crossed that threshold, they changed the code. There was a similar bill for public employees, because this is the first year they're crossing that threshold. And the bill did not pass, so employers do not even have the option to pay that 0.7 currently. That may change in the future, but
We think that in next year's legislative session, that's going to become an option for employers to pick up.
there's been a lot of discussion in some of the cities and about how making up that 0.7 in other ways. A lot of cities are doing either raising the pay or doing a 401k contribution or implementing a 401k match or some other way to make those employees whole.
So if I go from the perspective of what I've seen, with military retirement, who still has a retirement, they've gone from 50%, down to 40, and given other options for a thrift savings. This, Lockheed Martin 15 years ago, went away from pensions. It's all 401k. And more responsibility on the employees, and so there's not, this is across the country,
Oh, yeah.
and so as we say, try to make whole. I guess what does that cost the rest of the citizens, for that, when they're going through the same thing? That's just.
I think that the question as a city, are you willing to pick that up for public safety? And with what you traditionally paid, you can reduce this amount in order to have a net effect.
Okay.
So it's not both, it's, right, either or.
I'm sorry?
So it's either the 401K or the,
What was it?
No.
No, you've adjusted it. So you've adjusted it already,
Yeah, that-
5.41 to 3.27.
Over the years, as that pickup has increased, we have decreased that 401K that the city has been paying. So
So you've
really,
kept the rates, you've kept the
the
percentage.
total that
the
the
same.
city's been paying for police and fire has been relatively the same, but the makeup of it has shifted.
If you continue to pay, continue this program where you pick it up, when you do pick it up, there's really no net cost because we're going to turn around and reduce this.
It went
Does that
from
make sense?
okay.
Mhm.
But again, even that is optional.
Is this everything paid to them, or does the city pay it also an additional? This is everything.
This is
Every
everything.
retirement.
This is everything.
And this just goes into URS. This doesn't go,
This doesn't have to do with any separate 401K account,
They
nothing?
don't match.
This is
I
everything.
mean,
Years ago, we
is
just
there another separate 401K?
there's
grant
not.
or
Years ago, we had financial group, had 401K, and we merged everything with state, so. And employees can, in addition to this, on their own, they can elect
sure.
401K.
The match.
And many
But the
do.
city doesn't
But
match.
the city doesn't.
They can go into Fidelity or something.
They can do
or
whatever.
The
set up
city
a-
does not match, although there are a lot of cities out there that
Mhm.
do match
They used to.
something.
Kaysville used to.
Yeah, okay, I have a question, just on the email that I sent you.
So in regards to the city council, just to make sure it's clear, these are the classifications of employees.
Okay.
Years ago, this number used to be 18%. So we said, city council members, we're going to contribute 18% of your compensation to the 401K plan. And we continue to do that. It's whether you make a contribution or not, the city is making that contribution. You can elect to put money in the 401K. But the city makes that contribution. So that's a little bit of an anomaly from what you see here. Is that?
So a city council member, you're getting a contribution.
Yeah, that's why I
Even
get
if we're
something,
not
I get something from URS
Yeah, okay.
every year.
I just didn't know if
A
everyone did that.
statement
Yeah, we could.
Okay,
that shows,
I think
it's a whole lot of money.
I think we have three questions. Do we want to pick that up? And I think our recommendation is, yeah, we probably do. Most cities are picking that up.
Mm.
And the net effect isn't, if we continue with this column, the net effect is the same. Second question is, what do we do about that small
No,
percentage?
I got that. I'm just, my question just goes back to, if I'm thinking of, as me as gonna be a retiree, am I gonna get more out of the 401K contribution, which I might see some more of appreciation, or just the straight, salary that you get?
True.
I,
You could ask the employees to do that and say, but we're gonna give you a 401K.
One caveat with that pickup, if you opt to pick it up, so currently we're obligated to that 2.59. We still have to make a choice on that 2.14. If you opt to pick it up for tier 2, you have to pay it whether they're in the pension plan or the 401K. In other words, if they're in the pension plan, you're paying that 2.41 just for them to participate in the pension. But if employees have chosen the 401K, you have to make a similar 2.14 401K contribution.
Just have to bill the employee basically for that. Like, so you, essentially, if someone said, I'd rather do it in the 401K, then you'd have to collect from them the 2.14, right?
No, I'm saying if you choose to pay it as a city, like we're gonna pay this for the employee,
Yeah,
it's not, you have to pay it for all tier 2, whether they're 401K or not.
right.
That's the written legal law.
But can you, I guess what I'm saying is, can you pass that on to some employees but not others?
No, you can't. That's part of the
yeah, so
option.
the
You have to choose to
employees
do it.
don't have to, we have to do it one way or the other.
You choose to pay it or not. If you choose to pay it, then you can't say we're paying for these hybrid employees and not for these 401K employees. They all get the same benefit.
How much money annually approximately does that represent? I'm just
That 3.27 is about $100,000 worth of fuel.
95.
It's like 95,000
A year.
a year.
Okay.
So the 0.7, if we were to do something like an offsetting bonus or something, just to match the 0.7, that'll be coming out of employees' checks. It was like $35,000.
Okay, so that's
Not
what-
huge.
that's what I-
So I think our suggestion would be, we're gonna see some savings here. And I think we would suggest,
You believe it might end up being almost a wash,
I think wash are even better.
even better.
I think that's what we've decided to do historically, is to do that pickup. We continue with that pickup. And then for all tier 2 employees that are feeling this, we increase their pay line item just for that item. And then if next year they do say, cities, you can pick it up, it'd be easy just to say, we're not gonna continue your pay. It'd be a
That line
different-
item gets deleted
It would be
and
in
you
the
pick it up.
In the form of a bonus that would drop off if we can then pick it
So
up
you
later.
wouldn't say, we're just gonna increase your pay that amount, we're gonna have a separate line item that addresses that.
Seems fair, yeah. And I like the idea where we're having to pick up the 2.14, lowering the 401k.
Yeah, I think we have to, there's still that question is, are we getting, I'm gonna say this. Part of that tool was to incentivize public safety employees, so it's a recruiting tool,
Is it working?
that's the question.
And I mean, really what's really incentivizing is not so much, is that incentivizing them, or is it the fact that we're paying them way more?
Well, that's some employers are saying, we're not gonna pick it up, but we're gonna increase hourly rates. I think the state of Utah in general has decided to not pick it up, but to do an equal rate, like hourly rate increase in pay. So that, like, there's a lot of options, like,
With the thought thinking that employees, especially new employees, are more concerned about their early rate than their retirement.
It's true.
It's really hard to predict, right? Because it's like, I think you're right that new employees don't pay attention to those retirement numbers so much. They're
Until the
looking at
end.
their salary. On the other hand, and you've seen it so many times, right, where anything you take away, it's like they have a memory that lasts 30 years. It's like, oh, remember in 1992, you took this away from us, and it just.
So the separate line item, pay for it, and if it state says you pick it up, then you take that line off, and you just
So
pick
it
it up.
doesn't increase their base pay, it's just like a.
Right, it's just.
No, and I appreciate that knowing the total cost, you know, you're talking 30,000, 100,000, because then our most important asset as a city is right up here.
For sure.
And so if I'm gonna have to choose between those, well, I can defer a land use ordinance thing, you know, and,
Absolutely.
Right, to an investment in our.
if you do, you're having to pick and choose, and so anyways.
Especially where you have said we are not hiring any.
Yeah.
Take care of what we got.
I think a concern with that 0.7, I don't know how many employees are even aware, frankly, that they're gonna have to pay that starting July,
Yeah.
probably. And when they realize that's a new
First check,
thing,
they'll notice.
Yeah, right, exactly. They'll know.
Or two people.
right?
Yeah.
I think a concern might be that public employees would see this and think the city is choosing to pay 2.59% now, and they're picking up 2.14, and then on top of that, they're paying 3.27 for police and fire, and now I have to pay a measly 0.7%.
Right.
I'm concerned that would be an issue once they realize they have to start paying it. And I think it would go a long way if the city said, we're gonna try to offset that and do a bonus. It's not a lot of money, it would be about $30
$30 or something.
$30,000.
You're not talking about.
It's more the perception, I think.
If we tried to
Taking
decide
care
how
of
we
people.
would couch this, we think we get a lot of mileage out of that. We'll sit down with each department and say, you know, you're required to pay this now, but the city council has met and recognized that you're the most valuable resource, and we're gonna make you whole, so you don't have to.
Yeah.
I think we should do it.
It's such a-
No-brainer.
I'm surprised you haven't caught any crap about the 34, 22, and 15.
We do.
Oh, I'm sure.
The what's that like?
Just that the police get so much,
Oh,
the police
yeah.
get so much more.
They do.
But
I mean,
I
it
guess
hasn't really helped retain.
the good news is overall,
Yeah.
like Dean mentioned, our rates are going down. So it's just, they're shifting.
Yeah.
They're shifting more to the pickup, but we are getting about, on the far right, those savings is about $100,000 savings overall. So it kind of offsets.
We save 100, pay 30, we're ahead still.
You know what I mean? And all those police officers can jump over and do fire.
So
Different fund.
we have to file a form and officially make that election for police. So it sounds like
I think.
the direction is to do the pickup.
There'll be a resolution in the city council meeting. You want a break or do you want to keep going?
I'll take
a quick bio break.
This conference will now be recorded.
Oh,
Enough of the relationship building and all.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, the portal's opening up and there goes. Maybe we'll get somebody good though. I mean,
Ready? Okay, here's our next slide. You've seen this one before. We've added that 2024. We have used the URS cost of living adjustment as our tool to adjust our compensation plan. And we look at what their COLA is, and then in order to try to keep our compensation plan competitive with market, we adjust our plan by this market adjustment. I think there's a little bit of a confusion about it. Is it a COLA or is it a market adjustment? It's the same thing, but it's really a market adjustment. We're trying to be competitive. So it's not an automatic. You see the trend, what your COLA was, what the city adjusted their plan. The inflation again killing us. Last year, we kind of did a split where we said we're going to adjust our compensation plan to 6%. We're going to take 2% of that 8% and do a position analysis and make some adjustments. And that was huge. I think we talked about how much that helped our compensation plan. We now have the numbers for 24 and 4.1. So we have built into the budget, kind of as a starting place, 4%. So we'd recommend we adjust our compensation plan by 4%.
So one of the things that's a little bit misleading on this is even though you're comparing it to the URS will never go more than 4% ever. And so it looks like you're comparing an 8%, but really it was only 4% to the URS. It will only be 4% to the URS, 4%.
Well, until
They
this
never-
drops down to 2 and then becomes 4% until they make up this difference.
Which might be 10, 15 years down the road.
No, it's just a tool to,
Okay, I just want to say we're not,
Yeah.
when we gave an 8%, URS was really only given a 4%.
but also
Yeah,
But also down the road, if it goes to 2, we're only gonna go to 2. We're not gonna.
Yeah, that requires you to kind of track that.
But that's good information to know.
You want to jump? Are you done?
okay, so this is just a quick slide that
Getting
was presented at a conference that Levi went to and
Yeah.
Levi.
I went to the,
Sticky is the.
so this was from a economic update at the conference I was just at last week, so I thought I might throw some slides in. This just shows what the inflation rate has done over the last few years. And so, and I believe the number that just came out this week was 3.5%. So that just gives you an idea of the inflation, and you know this, just where inflation is going. But just because there's that downtrend, each of these numbers represents a year-over-year increase from the prior year. So even though it's going down, it's still
It's still going
increasing.
up.
So this slide kind of shows what prices have done. You can see that over the last 20 years, kind of the trend, but the last few years, as you know, it's just shot up. So just thought it was kind of
Go back to the previous one.
interesting slides.
You mentioned 3.5%, the Feds
Yeah,
had their report Wednesday. You realize what happened to the stock market on Wednesday? Down was down 400 points. It was down again this morning, 200 points because of inflationary fears have crept back in. So we had a pretty good ride for the last 9 months, and now
It's kind of getting sticky.
had to get off the roller coaster.
Anyway.
Yeah. So here's our bottom line up front in regards to personnel. So this is citywide. If we program 4% citywide market adjustment, $635,000. If we provide for employees that are eligible within their range for merit increase, not all employees are, but if they are, $300,000. If we do what we talked about last year and make sure that none of our employees are below 5% market average, we'd like to be, 0%, but I mean, we're working towards that. There's a minor cost, $39,000. And then some baseline adjustments. So insurance, we talked about $250,000. We have a contract where DTC would like for the city to provide a full-time officer there,
Right.
but yet they will reimburse us for that. So that's part of that, but there is some offsetting revenue there. And then some miscellaneous adjustments, and that includes maybe we tweaked overtime a little bit, or part-time wages a little bit, or if we know that there are some employees that are due promotions, for example, in the police department, if you qualify for a PO3 and PO2, there's an automatic bump in pay for that. In the fire department, if you are certified paramedic, there's a bump in pay for that. So that cost is about 86,000 of that 486.
So I'm questioning why, like, if there is an offset, why do we still add it to the 486 or does that just come out
That
later?
was my question too, because it makes it look bigger than it.
It's just accounting the
It's how the
expenses and
accounting
the
works.
revenues, they're just separate. This is what the expense.
This is just to
budget
let us know, but we aren't gonna have to, I guess what I'm saying is we're
It's
not gonna have to
150
make up, it'll eventually come out.
Yeah, the gap here makes 1.3.
Okay.
Yeah.
And we have included adjustment to city council pay in our budget as well. And that's in our baseline adjustments.
And a 4% just would be the same.
No, we looked to market and it's a little more than that.
We have to separately announce that, right? We have to have a separate meeting for that, if we do that, just.
We'll tell you what
I
we're
thought the
recommending.
state law
We're
just changed
recommending
State law.
We
based
did,
on-
we had to do a separate hearing. for it.
Yeah,
Based on our market
City
determination, city council go from 9,600
Wait, sorry,
to
sorry,
12,000.
go
I
ahead.
can't hear you. What was that?
Sorry.
Will you repeat yourself? Sorry.
Based on what we see in the market, city council pay would go from $9,600 to $12,500. And mayor would go, trying to think what you are, 1,000, about
Should be a lot higher.
14 to 22, something like that.
You're only at 14.
I think it's 18.
I thought it was 18, 19.
I think it's 18.
It'll pay for your electric bill for your.
It's 18.
Anyway,
It's not.
Yeah, I mean, so what are your thoughts, Dean? What's your thoughts? Like, this is your recommendation, this is what you think is the right way to go,
So,
at least for now. How are we doing on the increase? I mean, I know that one of the things we wanted to do was do that analysis, so we feel pretty good.
I felt
Or is
like
that your
based on
next?
what we did last year, if we keep the same target, which is 5% below average of the study that we did.
Yeah, you think this will
The
be?
current year is really just a pretty small hit. It's 40,000. It's like 13 positions. Mostly are really small percentage increases. A couple are a little bit larger. So that's really just kind of maintaining what we tried to do. Last year was a lot bigger hit, and
Right.
now we can kind of maintain it. And maybe in the future, we say, let's shoot for just average, not 5% below average, and we chip away at it that way.
I think what really helps there is the overall market adjustment.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what really
That we did.
keeps you moving. So you don't have
You
the.
don't fall behind.
You don't want to fall.
So, can you go back a couple to your inflation? So, okay, so,
Yeah, the green line is Utah area.
yeah.
Blue is the nation.
I mean, I just, if I'm looking, if we're under 4 for, from since February of 23, well, May of 23. For the last year, why do we go to the 4?
Just back
Just-
to
just
the,
because
this,
you are
because
at-
this has kind of been our baseline, kind of what we compare to. But other cities compare to the CPI.
I would just say, why wouldn't we just do 3.5?
What's CPI?
That's the inflation number.
Oh, gotcha.
Yeah.
I mean, that's,
Yeah, a lot of, like Levi said, a lot of cities use the CPI as their target. We've used URS and it's worked well for us.
I do think there's a lot to be said about being consistent and not
yeah.
cherry picking one year.
Yeah.
No, I
baseline.
got you. I just,
But you're
like
right, that's been our target. I mean,
so why is URS?
we varied.
Why is URS at 4 then for 24? Or why are they gonna be at 4 for next year if CPI is under 4?
Because
They've looked at a different snapshot.
I think that's,
They do try to take an average.
that's an average of the increase.
And the legislature could say no. Legislature could literally say, no, we're not gonna do
So if you go there, because it was at.
They will never go higher than 4, and they
So
can actually go
their
lower.
average may be here.
Yeah.
They're looking at the average increase for the year, and that's just.
Well, and that 21, 22 just kills everything.
And the reason is because the state URS can't take an 8% hit in their budget in 1 year. They can't do it.
I think we have URS, they
Where's my
look back
employees
3 years and do
URS?
an average to get to that 4%.
Okay. And then they'll, like Michael said, they'll never go above 4 until they're at 4, because if I went to that average for the last 3 years, it would be 6 or 7 or
But
something.
I don't know of any other city that does it that way. I mean, if we said we're gonna cap at 4 and other cities did 10, 12%.
You'd be killed.
But if it does drop below 4 in future years, URS
Yeah, that goes up to 4.
makes it until that 8% is eaten up.
No.
Dean, will they post a lower number? Like if they think it's like 2.2 or something, they would post the 2.2, but then pay the 4.
For those employees that were eligible at the time.
Right,
So
right.
it's not,
That's so complicated.
This just makes it harder to track.
Yeah, it would be really difficult to keep
Alright.
track of everyone.
But
What does? Sorry, I didn't hear.
I was just clarifying, because you're always bringing up that the URS won't ever go above 4. And so I wanted to make sure that this number they've got 4.1 wasn't because they're trying to make up for other ones. Like they'll post like a 2 point something, but then for the people who were eligible before, they'll pay that 4, but they'll like post the other number. Is what I was trying to clarify.
Has the Utah League of Cities and Towns ever had a meeting about this particular subject and thought about saying, hey, let's get together as cities and try and create,
Hold rates or something, or hold.
well, just sort of create, because I think the biggest thing, right, is that our goal is to keep and also, keep up with inflation, but it'd just be nice to know from an informative standpoint, to know what
They
other
haven't,
cities are
because
doing.
they haven't ever brought us together and said, let's compare salaries. I think it's antitrust type things.
Oh, is it?
But we've definitely had discussions, and every board meeting that I've been in has done exactly what they're suggesting as far as rating them on a lot of stupid, wonderful boards.
That it's set for, coming out for 4.
Okay, so if it was 3.5, it's just saving about
So-
$80,000. 75.
Can I bring up one other discussion? To me, all city jobs are very important, equally, pretty much. Because each one has a pretty specific, especially when you try to run lean like we do. But and other companies do this, this is not Michael Blackham idea, but they take tiered cost of living increases. They say people who are over 100,000 or such, they're gonna get a 3%. People who are under 100,000 are gonna get a 4%. And what that does is that keeps the gap from getting so much bigger from the upper tiered paid to the lower tiered paid. It keeps it more even. And so it doesn't it makes it so a department head or whatever isn't paid 30, 40%, 50% more than, and it keeps it more even at a city level, a government level.
At what point do you draw the line, and whether you're making, $10 an hour or $20 an hour, cost of milk has gone up for both of you.
But at $10 an hour, it's a lot harder to buy a gallon of milk at $20 an hour. And that's my point, is that's what I'm trying to make. You still have to buy the same amount of groceries when you have a wife and 2 kids, whether you're making $10 an hour or $20.
And hopefully you're making more than $10 an hour because you've developed the skills to be able to make
I was gonna say.
And I agree with that, but it's like, we keep getting hit up about we need to pay, and I'm not, nothing specific here, nothing specific, but I remember a former city manager that used to be here made it very clear that there's no such thing as a permanent employee. There are positions that may be permanent, but there is no such thing as a permanent employee.
We found that out for sure.
And so, if the grass is greener, go get it, There's nothing wrong with that, absolutely. But it seems like we're always trying to compete with just.
We want to keep our grass as green as we can.
And I get that,
And the
but
cost to hire.
But I hate seeing that gap keep
The
getting
training.
so much bigger, so much bigger, so much bigger. And if you looked and saw, and I shouldn't use, but even if I pretend I was never here or whatever, if we went back and looked at the wage pay scale or whatever for Kaysville City, you would probably see the difference in pay from the lowest paid to the highest paid was a very minimal percent compared to what it is now. It would be an interesting thing to look at.
I think and I hope any employees tuning in, because I know they get excited about this, know that we're just talking, we're not.
Yeah, I want to take care of, that's my number one thing. I want to take care of the employees.
But I think it's whenever I do the numbers on this type of stuff, I guess I start relating it to myself, and like hypothetically, if I were to make, if I was making 160 grand a year, and over the last 2 years, I got 10% increase, that's 16 grand extra that I'm making. $1,200-$1,300 a month, that would be huge, astronomical for me. That's, go out and lease a new truck, whatever, do whatever you want. I don't get that we don't in the private sector, but then again, a lot of these employees have chosen this sector because they don't get those high salaries. So I see where Mike's coming from. His analysis is that the higher you get, those percentages make a drastic difference. Like Perry just mentioned, the difference between 4 and 3.5 is 80 grand. So it's not like it's on a grand scale of a budget, it's a ton of money. Are we looking at the principal or are we looking at the dollars? Because I think that's maybe where it comes into like, wow, we're really increasing a lot. And yet, if you look at the history, it's usually 1 to 2. This is just sort of an anomaly.
As long as Democrats stay in DC, it won't be an anomaly.
Don't pick on us Democrats.
But I think that like it's an anomaly and I think that if we looked at the pay scale, I think we'd find that the majority of our employees are under 100. I don't know what percentage, under 100 or under 80. And so when you're talking a 10% increase for, for them, that just, it's not as big of a nut,
Does it help to provide more on merit? A bigger budget for merit increases than salary. I mean, I know that salary, obviously, we've got to at least keep up with inflation. But does that give you as departments more ability to reward those people who might be at a lower pay scale than a higher paid person?
That's a bonus and not a raise, right?
That would be a
That's not the
bonus.
gift that keeps on giving.
It's not necessarily more, it's a raise, but if.
It is a raise?
Goes to
Yeah,
merit.
because if you're in a pay range and you're not at the top of your scale, the merit allows you to move to the top of your pay range. So instead of, if you're here and we're saying you can move 3%, and the mayor suggests, well, maybe let them move 4%, it moves them closer to the top of the range. Does that make sense?
Yeah, so I think what she's suggesting is instead of doing 4% increase, you blanket at 3, but you increase merit to this year to 4. But can you, with our, the pay thing that we've set up, can we do something like that
Absolutely.
on a yearly basis and change?
See, and that's where, because when you budget for the maximum number, you're supposed to. I mean, but when he says 4% across the board, that moves the top range in the pay scale 4%. And so it just.
But I like what the mayor's
broadening
suggesting.
That's what I mean, what she's saying,
That's one way
keeps that down lower.
A little bit.
Maybe it doesn't, but maybe it just gives a little bit of an option for people to be, well,
Incentivized to stay, incentivized to, feel like, okay, I can.
well,
work
for
really
a
hard.
supervisor also to be able to say like, look, have a real conversation with the person and say like, look, the reason you're at 2 instead of 4 or whatever, but if you do this, this and this next year, before, I don't know, do you guys like that or does that conversation make that harder? I mean, from a standpoint.
Well, I think what it does do is, not that we have that many that are above average, but those that are outliers above average, it kind of contains that group a little bit. It allows us to allocate resources to maybe some other employees.
I could catch up a little bit.
That might make sense, is that?
Yeah,
There are, for those that are maxed out, they would not get any merit. And so the only increase they would get is that citywide.
Because they're at the top.
And there are some departments that are, for the power department, for example, has quite a few that are just already maxed out throughout the department. And so.
so that would hurt
So
that.
then the range would have to be increased or something.
So we have increased the range. You need to understand, we
Yeah,
increased the
that-
range to
that
meet
citywide
the competitive,
increases the
where they
range.
used to be about 10% below there. We increased that.
Yeah.
And so,
For those of us that were at the top of our range last year, we got the 6%.
Yeah.
Because we adjusted everyone.
but I'm just saying with the power company, using them for an example, they're top of the range. But what we did is we changed their range probably 5 or 6, 7 years ago. We said, okay, Rocky Mountain Power, this is the range. We're below it. So we adjusted.
That's part of the compensation stuff, I think.
Well, that's what we did.
So what we're saying is, there's probably no one within our power department that falls into this group.
Right. Because they used to be that way.
Yeah.
We fixed it years ago.
Well, yeah. We adjusted it.
Yes,
Not sure it's fixed, but it's adjusted.
yes.
So on the adjust positions to, 5% below the 39,000, does that cover some of those positions that have been difficult recently where like that amount is going to pull that position? That's where that's coming from.
Yeah, that's any position that is more than 5% below. At 5, average.
Okay, I mean, we don't have to make any decisions
No.
obviously today, but at least it's good discussion.
Great information, thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Because if we did what Mayor suggested, which I like, this number doesn't change because we budget for the same amount, right?
Oh, you're saying to shift to.
If we change,
It would.
if we change
It
merit,
would change.
It would change significantly.
Oh,
Factor in
because
people that are already. at the
people that are
top,
maxed, okay,
get it.
that's right. So it would change a little bit, but
So if,
That's why I'm saying, even if you increase the merit, the dollar amount might not go up because the people that are maxed out, which there's quite a few throughout the city.
okay.
wouldn't affect it.
I think if you increase the merit, this would go up some. If you decrease this, this would go down a lot.
About 78,000 every 0.5%.
Every 0.5%, yeah.
And as we wrap
So my
up,
math in public was okay.
as we wrap up today, if there are things you want us to look at,
Okay,
prepare for our next meeting, let us know. We'll,
maybe show us what that would look like. Just have
we're just, just
And then another question I have, let's say we have an employee that's better than average, but maybe not. Give the department head the opportunity to say, and maybe we already do this, I just don't know. But it used to be if you got a merit raise, you got the 4%. Maybe that should say, you're doing better, you haven't met all the objectives, so your merit raise is gonna be 2% instead of 3%.
and that's how that works.
Okay,
That's how
all right,
the
all right,
merit
okay.
It's all
It
discretionary.
used to be just a step,
No,
so,
3%.
yeah, I get it.
This would be the step. This would be the merit.
so I really like the mayor's idea.
So what were you gonna say though,
Yeah,
Jason? I'm
for what
curious.
it's worth, I feel like there's some psychological benefit to just always moving through the range. I had just this huge debate in my last city when we did this compensation study about getting employees at the top of their range quickly. And the consultant was just so dead set on, once you get people at the top of the range, then they're just kind of stuck there and they're just sort of like
What's
feeling
their-
like I'm
what's
never
their
moving.
incentive?
Right. But if you always have that runway that they can, know that there's continued opportunity, there's something to be said for that too.
That's what I was trying, yeah, that's a
Yeah,
good way of
that's true.
saying it.
Unless
So-
you just always increase the, yeah, I
Right.
got it.
I mean, yeah, it's just one of those.
Probably two schools of thought happen though. You almost have to change the mentality because I think a lot of the times in one area, you're like, oh yeah, I'm just gonna give everybody the 3, because you don't want to deal with giving that person 1, giving that person 0, giving that person 2. But if you did it what you're talking about, then you'd have to almost change, if you continue to make the runway a little bit longer, you'd have to change the school of thought to being like, wow, giving you 1 is a awesome, right? Like instead, does that make
As
sense?
long
Like
as-
it's
well,
almost like,
And there's also this whole market component to like, what are other cities doing? And because I think people are always looking at that and you don't want to be like, oh, everyone else is doing an average of 3% and we're doing 1. You wouldn't want that really, but I mean,
it'd be interesting to see by department, just curious, by department and by department head,
Next slide.
who gives the 2s, who gives the
Yeah.
3s, and who gives the 1s.
We go to the
Like-
next slide and see what the costs are.
But do you understand what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like that?
Yeah.
We
Like,
could pull that.
it'd be just,
Who's
I'd just
our
be
little
curious to,
information?
yeah, who actually
Actually-
uses it as like a tool or who really just says, yeah, just
I talked to Duncan about pulling that, because last year we used the form in OnBase, and so it gave us the ability to kind of extract that data.
be interesting.
So,
I think the next slide will, well, maybe not. Let's come to that personnel slide.
Personnel.
Yeah.
So
So
slide down to that,
we jumped ahead, but this I think relates to what we're talking about.
probably two.
Here are the personnel expenditures and how it affects each department
Oh,
with what we program. So you can see most of it hits public safety.
So on this slide, you can see the bottom right, it's 1.1 million. That's the general fund portion of that 1.4 total. If that makes sense.
Yeah, the bulk of it is salaries. Well, I think Jason, you made a good point. I mean, it'd be great to be able to change the culture thought process in Kaysville City, but that's not where it stops. Everyone looks at other cities, what's everyone else doing, so I get it, changing the whole culture overall in the cities, that would be, it's just that expectation kind of Well, not even kind of, it just is.
And a lot of relates to the number of employees.
Yes.
The number of employees getting to 4% is what, pushes those.
Oh, okay, getting the
They
focus
just have
on.
more employees in the police.
I mean, I know a lot of other, when they talk about the merit, at the first of the year, they have a sheet, your goals, what you go through, and it has a percentage and it has a number to each one in the deal. In what aspect of your job there is, whether it be road maintenance or something, or what you do. And then at the end of the year, your supervisor and you get together and you talk about what you do. And it comes up to a number, you divide it by a certain amount, and it gives the percent of the merit raise right there. You say, okay, this one's worth 20, you probably only got a 10 in this one. So you take and put the 10 over there and you add them all up at the end, you divide it by a certain number, it gives you a percent, that's your merit.
One of the struggles we've had is every department does that a little different.
Okay.
So if you do want to shift, well, that's what I was gonna say, if you do want to shift to more of a merit-based thing, I think it would be really important to standardize how we assign merit across the city.
I think it's still merit, it's just the way you evaluate.
Yeah, the employee evaluation is a little different, and it's not as uniform as we would like it to be.
And it's really hard because
For
personalities.
department.
And that might,
Yeah.
There's some positions where it's easy to compare a sergeant to a sergeant. But how do I compare a city recorder to a finance?
Yeah.
and some would need to be tweaked, but I think even if we just, there's several, solutions out there that allow you to have a standardized evaluation kind of.
In the organizations that I've seen them do it, pretty much the employees, you say, what are your most important and what are your least important? Put a value to them. And it's worth 100. In the end of the year, when you give your supervisor, you take those and you divide them and you come up with a number, and that's a merit increase. And I think it's a fair way to do it, kind of.
We had the discussion, Jason and I, Kim, probably 3 months ago on trying to standardize the evaluation form. And we're working on that. But nevertheless, it's still, the supervisor has the obligation, the opportunity to award merit up to what the council.
Yeah.
I mean, another thing, you can adjust the ranges without adjusting people's immediate pay. I mean, that 4% that we're suggesting would adjust the range and it would adjust everyone's pay along with it.
Oh, it also just.
But if you wanted to give people more of a runway without a huge dollar hit in the current year, you can adjust the ranges out a little bit, but not, there's
I think
different ways to do it.
I think that's what we've said. This is what we're going to adjust the range.
Okay.
And I still feel like that's not an automatic. I mean, most people will get that, but I still think the departments ought to have some discretion.
I do too. I support that.
But just in the past, everyone has gotten it.
True,
It hasn't been-
in most cases. There have been a few exceptions over the years.
Okay. All right.
Sorry, we're kind of jumping around.
Okay. Now we're going to shift, kind of wrap it together, try to align revenues with the expenditures. This is just looking at the general fund. These are revenue increases or decreases that we're seeing in the general fund. There's a little bit of a bump in taxes, a little bit of sales tax, not as much as we had hoped. A little bit of property tax. Not much in franchise, but there is a little bit of a bump in energy use tax. So we're seeing that. We're also seeing some reductions. Building permits are dropping off. We were trending about 600,000 a year, and now we're down to about 400,000 a year. Anyway, I mean, this is highly summarized, but yeah. Anyway, about $1 million in revenue to the general fund increase. Here are the personnel expenditures that we looked at. 1.1 difference from the prior year. And we'll look at the operating. We looked at this prior. And then we look at capital. We talked about, and then we combine the expenditures. We have general fund, combine it, and we have the deficit of about $2.1 million.
1.4 of that is the employee.
Well, more or less
1.3
1.3.
One is the general fund.
Yeah.
Portion of it.
Oh, okay. Yeah, we're making less than we're spending.
And that 23, that's actual.
That's like your wife's budget, right?
It's my budget.
Going to the expense.
That's expensive.
Yeah, Levi makes a good point. This is last audit year, we dipped into fund balance only $350,000.
I think we budgeted more than that. Luckily,
That's what we ended up dipping
we
into.
ended up only 300.
It's huge,
That's big.
because we had budgeted like 800,000.
Yeah, 90,000.
And I think 24 is gonna be flat. I don't think we're gonna have much of a savings there.
We've benefited from sales taxes going up more than we've been budgeting for the last couple of years. I don't think that's gonna be the case.
That's not how it's
Sustainable.
been.
Almost, we're almost projecting the same as last year. I think we bumped it, maybe
A
200,000.
little bit.
Sales tax is what, about 7.5, 7.4?
7.8, I think we
million.
budgeted
So we're
8.1.
at about a million.
I think we budgeted part of this 8.1.
People eventually gonna stop spending. When the delivery bans on some.
I was gonna say, what about our jacket hall and food hall?
It's gonna be cost too much. That's crazy. I know.
How many come into my house?
Yeah, sales tax, we budget $8,085,000.
Stop using Grubhub.
Okay.
Okay, we're just gonna scroll through these. If you want to dive deeper, let us know. So this is the redevelopment agency fund. I think a significant piece here is that grant that Melinda applied for that small area lot grant. That's $130,000 revenue coming in, only cost us about $9,500,
That's great.
which is a good deal. So that's the RDA budget.
Yeah, that's good.
Then we go to the ARPA budget. Again, these funds are in our bank account. We're not going to receive any more, so now we're just spending it out. And we have, by the end of this year, by the end of calendar year, we need to obligate anything that we have left over. And so we've already talked about that 1.4 for the water. We think when we get all the fiber stuff done, we're gonna have a little bit of money there to allocate. So we're going to come to you within the next 6 months and say, this is what's left in ARPA. Here are some eligible projects. How would you like to spend that money? You obligate that money, and we have until 2026 to spend it.
I like obligating one-time expense.
Here's the road. As Levi and I talked about the road fund, one thing that concerns us a little bit is by compressing 200 North project from 3 years to 2 years that we talked about, it puts us pretty tight with
We would be negative.
negative fund balance. So we're gonna have to watch that pretty close. One thing we talked to Josh about yesterday is we think there's some potential to get some funding for that 200 North project, but we don't know what it is or when yet, so we haven't programmed anything. I'm sorry, we're giving you a lot of information, sorry. Then ramp fund, we talked about that. The numbers are good. We've tried to stay about $300,000.
We've talked about going to 4 this year.
We talked about maybe a 1 year in order to do that big project. But the reason why we've stayed under is try to set aside some for
For the high school,
the junior high.
the junior high, yeah.
But we think it may be valued to do a little larger this year and then maybe we'll pull back next year a little bit. Yeah.
That's what we talked about to the
Harry, did the ask that you got the other night, did it balance out or was it more than what there was?
550.
Is what the total ask was 550?
Yeah.
And it looks like,
But like
Then a reward.
400,000 for 420 of that was from the city.
This is from the city and this is what the ask was. What we've included in the budget. Sorry,
Oh, okay, okay.
I think the ask was more than that.
Yeah, the ask was about 550.
550.
So,
And our revenue from ramp is about 523.
Yeah, that's an actual, so
That's
that's,
an actual,
that's
so that's
about
about
what we're
523. So that should stay pretty.
we're kind of factoring in saving some money each year because we'll be getting close.
And we did have 1 year in 22 that we collected, I think, a few months worth that we didn't program, so they're right.
So what do you think you guys will, how much of that will you think you're planning to?
we talked 400, but if
Okay.
you're showing that you've talked with Cole that maybe 465, I think he went lower to the committee and we'll maybe
Okay.
adjust.
I think the only exception to that, Perry, is this includes not only the rail trail,
The sign.
restroom, but it includes.
You can, the Barnes Park sign.
It's
Right.
I think
So the
75.
question might be, maybe we pull the sign off.
Or something, yeah.
So the amount that they're pulling out, or that you're kind of pulling out to save for that gym thing though, can't be decided for the gym thing until the ramp group votes on it, right?
We could decide it for no, Cole basically said that
that's-
we're not gonna spend everything, because here's a big project we have in the future.
So you're not making it all available.
But doesn't it have to be approved at that point when you want to spend it? Like not that I'm saying the ramp committee would, but couldn't the ramp committee be like, never mind, we don't want to do this, we want to take this big chunk we've saved and spend it on something else?
Ultimately, council decides. The
Yes,
ramp advises the council.
I think that's sort of the direction we've given.
Yeah.
The council.
And you are allowed to carry over ramp funds?
Mhm.
Yeah.
And it's only able to be used for,
Or
This is its own separate fund, has its own fund balance that'll carry over everything.
So then the council at the time though could decide to do that. Not that I'm saying that's a good
Council
idea.
could say, we don't trust the ramp board and we're gonna do whatever we want to do. That's not a good way to say
That's
that.
not a good-
They could, but I can't imagine.
Sorry.
Well,
I mean, who knows,
I don't
right?
think they would
Maybe
either,
10
but-
years, yeah, it's supposed to be built this next year,
They listen around as much as they
not
listen
this
to
year.
The school,
With the remodel, they want to
Yeah.
start working on it next year.
that's
Oh, really?
faster
It's
than I
coming
thought.
up?
I thought it was gonna
I
be.
mean, it might be a couple years out, but yeah, they've got to build a couple of schools.
I think they were saying 27.
Did they say
Yeah,
27?
that's what I
Okay, so
thought. I thought it was
26.
yeah, because county has no problem with raising our school taxes.
Yeah, you're right.
The Olympic.
Yeah, it does it. It's the school.
Okay, even worse.
Okay, right. Building authority,
Generate revenue during the Olympics.
if you ever use the building authority.
That's a
have-
good idea, John.
That's residents of their homes.
Yeah, let them
Taxable.
Airbnb.
Every city owns facility out
Put in the
there.
transfer
Teach them these
tax.
things, yeah, just from your own
I know,
conversation.
sorry, we're, okay, here we go, here we go. Where are we
Is that
at?
how the first word works?
That's how the first word works. You gotta use your dad voice now.
Anyway, it was the NBA to fund the debt service for the police station, the city hall debt service. I'm just rambling, so.
No, this is good.
I'll take over, Leila.
Good.
Gone?
These are all things we've talked about, it's just. How they going on.
Hey, Dean, how are you gonna fix it though, so it's not 2.2? Where's your magic wand?
Yeah, it's in the hat. Okay, that's governmental funds. And then I think we shift to enterprise funds. you can see here on the water fund with the personnel costs, the operating costs, and the capital cost, we're still gonna dip into retained earnings to help us do balance the budget.
Utility fund.
And we've only included the major enterprise funds here. We have not included pressure irrigation, sanitation, or
Sewer?
Sewer.
Sewer. Yeah.
but we do need to mention sewer, and you probably know about this.
30%.
Going up $10 per month.
Oh, a lot of money.
What's the current rate per month?
Current rate is 26.
It's about a 30% increase.
Going up to 34.75 per month.
Jeez.
Wow. So that's going to be a pass through. We'll collect it from our residents
Shitty.
and pass it through.
We should
Just
just
charge
pass
the
the
fee.
fee. Collect.
User
User
fee.
How much time did you use?
Yeah, go charge per flush.
How many people?
Just for
Chat.
Let's go to stormwater, I think, Stan, or power's next.
I guess.
You can see personnel, operating capital. We programmed a 5% increase, but we're still dipping into retained earnings. So we're going to recommend a 5%. We don't know what the structure like that looks like yet. Probably gonna have to do something, if we do that, something else in the next few months.
That revenue line, so you can see that went up 1.19. That's essentially the 5% increase. That's pretty similar to what we put in the operating. We plugged in the projected UAMPS cost of power, and you can see that's pretty much a 1.1 increase as well. So just that 5% increase essentially offsets the
That's-
projected power costs.
So it's not putting money back.
So it's kind of,
Okay, last thing is stormwater. Same thing, here are the expenses, here are the revenues. We've got a little bit of a plug. We do have some pretty significant capital. But remember on that capital, that's that $2 million project that we'll only do if the funding, if we get that, comes in.
The legislature is going to say no.
So what?
The legislature was gonna do something about this LID and all that, where they're gonna say no more than what we were doing 10 years ago or whatever. Stop.
So that's what we have for today. I think Anne Marie has sandwiches coming at 10:30.
Oh, that was fast, really? So we're done?
A lot faster.
I mean, ish?
Yeah, we're gonna end with sandwiches.
Now we all need red pens and we need to start over.
We want you to start thinking about
Yeah.
what the next
Okay.
steps are and how we can best prepare for our next meeting.
yeah.
I don't know how we else want to couch that, Jason.
Yeah, I think we got some feeling here, direction, but definitely let us know in the next week or so if you have any other thoughts, and we'll reconvene on the 24th with some tweaks here.
I mean, I have a very different, a little bit more, I have a philosophy and a thought, and I would love to hear my other council members share theirs. But it's fairly simple in my mind, but it's very difficult because I think this is very hard to see. But I've tried to take in what we hear. We've got the information from our auditor. He says we are very financially, fiscally strong. We're doing very well as a city. So what I say, kind of coming back to you, because you guys are the experts, you're the city manager, you're in charge of all these guys, and there's a lot of complicated things here. But my opinion kind of is, the state law says you will bring us a balanced budget every year. And I feel like, you know what the revenues are, you know how much money we have. You need to fight amongst yourselves what you think is the most important. Come back to us with what your recommendations is with a balanced budget, because I, as a council member, have no intentions of raising taxes or fees. So that's kind of where I'm at. And I think that gives you a fairly good guideline of what my thoughts are right now.
To go along with that too, I'm not in a position now to where I can even consider truth in taxation until I have more insight from all the departments, because there's just a lot here, and it's hard for me to look at this and to prioritize or to know maybe it's all extremely important, but I probably need more context too in that regard.
Well, so like that slide early on, well, there you go. So there's the three tools you have, or we have to, reduce expenses, use reserves, or look at taxes. And there's a big gap. Obviously, I think we definitely have talked about some areas that we could cut back on, or we could hunt for a future year. And we can come back with some ideas there. We have some thoughts already on that. We certainly have a pretty healthy reserve. That's certainly part of the solution. But I don't know if there's enough just deal with those tools alone. Something we'll have to talk about.
I feel like there was a couple opportunities, a couple chances in there where you talked about things that could come from fund balance, like there was a $300,000.
The Angel Street,
Yeah, early on,
the 300,000.
I wondered about like even to like this interview room for the police. It's 35 grand. That seems like a one-time expense type of thing. Like, and maybe it already is coming out of fund balance first next year. Yeah, so I think I would want to see any one-time expenses that are a must. But, those are things that I feel really good about doing through fund balance. Like Mike says, we have that healthy reserve, but you don't want to use the healthy reserve for ongoing expenses, but as many of those that we can see now that make sense to come from the fund balance, that would be my hope or direction. And then at one point in time, Jason, you had sent an email out, that I was really encouraged to see about, looking at, had a chance to see kind of how the city's running, and you're able to maybe look at like positions that maybe could go from full-time to part-time, And again, I'm not trying, like, I worry about these things because these are people, so I'm not trying to say, but also as a business or as a city, that was really encouraging for me to see, because I think that that's something that normally people would do, is they'd look at, okay, how do we look at those things? That helps with health insurance costs, that helps with all kinds of stuff.
And more than I can say right now, but we are definitely looking at that and slowly working on that. It's part of, the process of making sure we're being extremely careful with the resources we have. At the same time, we know that we're already running lean.
Okay.
And, you compare us to other cities, and it pains me a lot to hear from the departments here, what they're trying to get by with. Excuse me. And I'm careful not to want to burn out people too much. I know those position requests are not just made up, they're real needs, I believe.
Yeah.
So I think it's important that if we continue to push those position requests off, that we make sure that to run lean and mean, we have to make sure that we're keeping good people here. And so I'd say not to cut in too much to the ability to maintain a good market position for us. So looking at that is really important, I think. I don't know that there's a whole lot we can do, major things that are going to move the needle as far as saving money. Because again, this is, I think, a relatively lean budget. There's certainly things we can push off and run a little more efficient here and there. But boy, ultimately, I think we're already pretty lean, so there's just not a lot of, in my opinion, a lot of opportunities.
Well, that's good to hear. It's just a question that needs to be asked, so I feel like the answer is good.
Well, every time you kick something down the road, you just building a bigger berm that you're gonna have to, address at some point.
Yeah.
That's true. Even with the position request too, it'd be nice to know on some of those, like if there's ones that take higher priority than others, a little more context around that.
Right.
Because at the end of the day too, Dean, if you guys definitely need more help, or Nick needs more help, and he's getting to the point where it's just really too much, I'd rather talk about that now and kind of know the priorities among that list at least.
Keeping in mind, they're not in the budget now.
Right.
Yeah,
They're not,
part
no,
of
we
that.
understand that.
Right.
I think, we'll see some things play out here over the next several months that might change the landscape. We'll see kind of what our needs are. We are recruiting now for Levi's position and national search, so we'll see what that kind of pans out to be, and just be flexible depending on how things shape out.
Can I just add, since everyone's given their thing? So I know I came off kind of hard on like swinging on the code thing, but with things, it's so much in flux, I think that's probably something we could push down the road. But I kind of agree with Perry, like the more things you push down the road, and especially last year when I was researching, and I need to talk to the department heads again, but all the positions that we put off last year and that we're putting off this year, I feel like are needs, and we're seeing it in employees lost. Like we've had, we get employees poached pretty frequently, I feel like. But especially like, in the police department situation, I asked Chief, I was like, Chief, this employee who left, is it something we've done, or is it just, one of those things? And he just said, that front office area gets burned out pretty easily because they're doing a lot of work with just the 2 people. So kind of like Jason was saying, I think a lot of these positions are needs. And, if we decide that this year's not the year, I do think kind of like we did last year where we kind of bit the bullet on raising the pay scale, we need to come up with a plan to figure out how to fill these areas so that we're not constantly having that turnover.
Yeah. And things constantly change, a couple months ago when Jessica Busk was in that position in police, things were going great, but boy, all of a sudden things can change quickly. She was doing the work of, a couple people, and
Yes.
she's just one of those rare people that's extremely driven and focused and doesn't do anything, get to work. And it's hard to find people that can do that all the time. But yeah, we are having these conversations for sure. I think at some point, some of these positions, I think we'll need to find a way to feel, again, we're always looking for opportunities first to look at everything else. Like I think Nick's idea of having a 3rd-year law clerk come in is great,
Yeah.
and hopefully that works really well. So always trying to find creative solutions, and I've got some other ideas too we're looking at with other departments, but.
Maybe just a comment on Mike's comment about, we're in an excellent financial position. We are, and we're fortunate to be there, but we wouldn't be doing our job if we weren't suggesting how we stay in that. I mean, it'd be easy for us. The easiest thing for us would be to say, fill the gap with fund balance.
Well, yeah,
But that, we wouldn't be doing that.
and kind of the point I'm trying to make is it's really hard, I think, for people who don't understand the actual operations of the city fully. We over the budget. That's why I like the idea of you guys get in a room with your department heads, you beat each other up, and you figure out what are the highest priorities, then you bring us a balanced budget.
I think we've done that already.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, the general fund, it all comes down to taxes, and that's the way government works.
Well, I get it.
But, as a city with services we're trying to provide, the center food lowest in the county, I don't know how we do it With that, when Farmington is saying they're gonna have a 50% public tax increase this year.
They haven't raised taxes.
They haven't yet.
In years.
But
We raised taxes last year, we did the year before, but we did the year before.
What was
and we did
what was the percentage last year, remind me?
17%.
It's so hard
And
to
maybe
see
the
the
combination,
taxes
maybe
be raised with all the other
raise
rates.
it just a little bit, just to try to keep pace. And maybe you don't fill the whole gap with tax increase, but maybe you do just enough to 5% one year instead of 20% 3 years somewhere.
I would much prefer to do that incrementally not necessarily every year, but we need to have keep in taxation every year, I would think. I just think that's more transparent for people. We all know that costs are rising. So to tell our community, hey, the sky is green, that's actually not true. So, and I do appreciate that we have a good savings, but we keep using it.
The hard
And
part
it's
about the truth in taxation is we did that, we raised it, but then
Or we can hold
we
it.
only used 350 out of the 900 that we raised to hold. And so in some ways, it's like, oh, darn.
That's not.
Oh, isn't that what that
That's not-
number said? I thought you said that after everything was said and done.
That's what we ended up, it was a fund balance return, but that was generated savings by either increased revenues or savings from departments.
But like the actuals versus what we had projected wasn't the difference, wasn't the net difference.
I mean,
There are two different, that was the 23 numbers, and you might be comparing it to 24 budget.
Right,
But I think what you're saying,
we figured we were gonna using 900,000, we only used 300, you're right, that's what we did.
in 23, but Levi's right, it's the 23 numbers, the 350. The tax pertains to this year, and we don't know how that's gonna end up.
We don't know how that's gonna pan. The decision we made, what you're saying is the decision we made last year to do truth in taxation, we don't know the results of that yet.
That's correct. When will we? Like,
At the end of the fiscal year.
Fiscal year, right?
okay.
But even then, it'll be a couple months later on.
I mean, we'll have a pretty good idea. I mean,
Okay. Yeah, you'll be within a
the audit
quarter.
won't be done, but we'll have a good idea.
Okay.
Well, can't you technically say if it was 17%, we're gonna generate 17% more than in property tax this year than we did last year? Can you safely say that, someone?
Estimate?
Oh, fun. Okay, I got
I
it.
think it would be helpful, obviously, we'll go back and try to do some of these things, but if there's any larger items that you all feel consensus on, let's use fund balance for this, or let's push this, that would be helpful for us to just try to knock some of those out, like, okay.
Could
we're
we see
okay
a
with-
list, but it would be helpful for me to see a list of the things that that you feel could qualify for fund balance? Because like I said, we went through a lot of stuff.
There's a lot there.
Look at two sheets, look at improvements and look at vehicles.
Improvements in vehicles?
Which,
And I definitely don't wanna see 200 north
Like
tax
seven,
tore
three,
completely
eight.
apart, both west and east.
For sure.
I definitely don't wanna see that.
Yeah.
I
Well,
definitely don't wanna see 200 north tore apart both west and east, and the same,
I agree with
I wanna push that.
so do restrooms, yeah, but that might be the same time. If they're starting on that project right now, on the one that's gonna be at the bottom, and we're trying to budget for the other aspect of it, then the other aspect will be this time next year. Right?
I'm sorry, I don't understand.
Yeah, I'm not sure.
It may
Okay,
already be
so
staggered.
the one that, yeah, what I'm saying is I think it's already staggered because he's asking for it for the current, for the project, for next year. So I think that means that it's,
So what's our fund balance?
just make sure they're not the same.
I guess it depends on which one.
Two eight or something.
Wait, what is it?
Improvements.
You said improvements also,
These are items that are subject to.
Yeah, sure.
Vehicles. Well, you guys can talk
You said equipment.
But also.
Equipment and
Operating.
vehicles, right?
I feel like the operating too, if there's any, like the ARPA pool for the land use.
Yeah, see, that was the one that you
Yeah, I feel like you have to see how But those are,
Equipment's
those are
page
things
I
that
9,
think that number
say,
is.
we're gonna,
vehicles.
I think that's important, let's use fund balance, or let's push it to 13.
Wait, maybe not equipment, did he say improvements? Improvements. Was improvements on the list that you said we were looking at?
Buildings, improvements, and vehicles.
Buildings, okay, buildings, improvements,
Yeah.
but not equipment.
Equipment, period, but big ticket items are gonna be.
Really, any improvement?
And.
Cause you've got like a network switch replacement,
And look at
it's
general
90
fund.
grand.
Yeah, we can take that one off.
So
I
sad,
think
but
we're-
yes,
Well, once,
I think
once
it's
that
good.
department changes, I think
so.
we'll get some.
I'd like to get more feedback after that
Yeah.
change.
But that's
Kind of like.
probably the only thing.
This interview room
The
sound.
land
I mean,
use
I
code.
wish it was, because I'm so
Maybe
passionate about
push
it, but I
to
think
next year.
Yeah, I think that's definitely.
the shifts that are going on in that economy, we get to see what things we can accomplish without it. And then I don't know anything about it.
Would you say?
So there's shifts going on in that department.
So, okay. So, let's do consensus.
But it's even things like this the cremation garden, like those are types of things I feel like we could pay for
That one seemed pretty like.
with the fund balance.
No,
Oh, yeah.
I'm just saying, like, it's a one-time thing, it's like, the cemetery is a staple of Kaysville, we've saved money to put, it'd be like saving money to put something in your backyard. It's like,
I will tell you, I talked to my brother-in-law who does have an own mortuary, and I asked him about cremations and if it's increasing, and he said, not really. I mean, we're hoping in the future, to save space and everything. They said, are you seeing a huge increase in people choosing that route? And he said, no, not in our area at least, but not that we should have planned for the future, but maybe we could push it.
well, and that whole thing too is more about like just that I think the garden
Yeah,
in
the
general
angel
is a little bit
statue.
different, like, yeah, but you're right, it is.
Even if we don't see an increase, it would still increase the capacity of the cemetery, even if we don't fill up as much.
Yes.
And maybe that's what changes the demand is, okay, well, I still want to go to Kaysville, but my only option is to do.
Yeah.
And Provo saw some, I think they saw some shift that way in the cremations once they kind of
They had it.
came close to capacity on the regular
You do this
burial.
playground, cremation, fund balance.
Do we do?
Exactly. You can be cremated, it's not against the church. 100%.
Hey,
Yeah, wasn't there something on that, like, that was sort of frowned on? Or, hey, I don't know if it was ever official.
Yeah, I don't know if it was
Does that help?
They have an agreement.
Yeah.
So,
I don't know if it's ever been.
yeah, I don't, it's like a lot of things you hear, and then you don't ever know if it's actually.
Well, I
At
feel
some
like
point,
after
they
reading
would have
Farmington
to,
is
but I
done
don't
for
know if
us, they
I was
owe another
thinking like
sweatshirt or something.
general conference.
Like,
We support.
Yeah.
hey, we should at least get a sweatshirt out of it. Well, it's not.
I did tell them that a hoodie is not enough, particularly.
That's what I'm
I
saying.
think the church came out and said, hey, this, it could easily just switch.
Can I also text them that?
The trend
Because
for
I
a
have
while.
friends, but I wasn't sure I was allowed to talk about it. Oh,
I mean,
this is gonna be about it.
space in it, we just take out of space, go everywhere.
Once you get Twitter, you are stuck in it.
We won't even look at you in meetings.
Right?
We're not coming,
I
you're
feel
in.
like that's coming pretty soon, where there's gonna be a major switch,
Your
In
residents.
fact, I
cities
would
start
rather
running out of space.
But one bar things.
Is there an update on train trails?
What?
Is there an update?
Yeah, did we close the meeting or?
My
are we
neighbor
still
says
in the
it's
meeting?
happening at Dominion,
We're
and
still in the meeting.
they've got on good sources. So
Your neighbor
that's
really
probably true.
I'm going to that, I like that.
You want to close the meeting there?
Oh, sorry.
Is there anything more?
Anything else? We appreciate the opportunity to have this budget discussion Thank you, Jean. Thank you, Levi. Thank you, Jason. Meeting is now adjourned. Do we need a vote? No. Okay. All right,
I
good.
just have to stop the recording.
Yeah, sorry.